homeless 9-year-old boy walks barefoot into a billionaire's private party and announces he can cure a leg condition that stumped every specialist in the country in under 20 seconds. The real estate mogul laughs, then bets $1 million the kid will fail and promises to have him arrested when he does. But when the billionaire's leg suddenly locks in agonizing paralysis and the ambulance is 30 minutes away, everyone watches in horror as security drags the child forward. What happens next in those 18 seconds will shatter every assumption in the room and turn a single night into a viral firestorm that changes lives forever. If you're curious to see how a discarded piece of trash and a photographic memory collide to create the impossible, stay until the very end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Jalen's story travels tonight. The October wind carried the scent of rosemary and wealth across the outdoor terrace of Sterling Oaks, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't bother with a sign. If you had to ask where it was, you couldn't afford to eat there. String lights glowed amber above reclaimed wood tables, each one positioned to offer a view of the valley below, where the lights of the city stretched out like a carpet of fallen stars. The evening air held just enough chill to make the heat lamps feel luxurious rather than necessary. Graham Carrington sat at the center table, his custom wheelchair positioned at the head like a throne. At 48, he still carried the sharp-edged handsomeness of his youth, though his jawline had softened and his hair had gone silver at the temples in a way his publicist called distinguished. His navy suit was cut to minimize the wheelchair, tailored so precisely that from certain angles you might miss it entirely. He'd built an empire buying distressed properties and flipping them into luxury developments, and tonight he was celebrating his biggest acquisition yet, 400 acres of waterfront land that every other developer in the state had tried and failed to secure. To vision, Graham said, raising his glass of 30-year-old scotch, and to the idiots who said it couldn't be done. Around the table, 6 faces smiled and raised their own glasses. His attorney, Marcus Webb, wore a shark's grin. His CFO, Patricia Ewan, had already mentally calculated the profit margins. His head of development, Craig Mullins, was halfway through his second bottle of wine and feeling philosophical about tearing down the old cannery that currently occupied the waterfront. His publicist, Simone Torres, was composing the press release in her head. His personal physician, Dr. Raymond Howell, was thinking about his own investment and the beach house it would buy. And his daughter, Vanessa, 23 and already managing a portfolio that would have made most CEOs weep with envy, was checking her phone and wondering when she could leave. 400 acres, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. I still can't believe the Hendersons folded. They swore they'd never sell to you. Everyone has a price, Graham said. You just have to find the number that makes them forget their principles. The table laughed. It was the kind of laugh that came easy when you were winning, when the world bent itself around your will and called it destiny. The waitstaff moved between the tables like ghosts, silent and efficient. Sterling Oaks employed only people who understood that their job was to be invisible until needed. The chef had been stolen from a Michelin 3-star in Lyon. The wine list read like a museum catalog. The bathroom fixtures were gold-plated, which Graham found tacky, but his guests expected. He shifted in his wheelchair, trying to find a position that didn't make his left leg ache. The pain had been getting worse over the past 3 weeks, a deep burning sensation that ran from his hip to his ankle. It felt like someone had replaced his bones with hot metal rods. He'd seen 4 specialists. They'd run every test modern medicine could offer. The diagnosis came back the same each time. Idiopathic neuromuscular disorder, possibly autoimmune, possibly degenerative, definitely puzzling. The treatments they'd tried had done nothing. Physical therapy made it worse. The medications left him foggy without touching the pain. Dr. Howell had been earnest and useless. These things sometimes resolve on their own, he'd said last week, which Graham understood to mean the man had no idea what was wrong or how to fix it. Tonight the pain was manageable. He could smile through it. He could toast and laugh and sign the contracts that Marcus slid across the table between courses. He could ignore the way his leg trembled slightly, a vibration so subtle only he could feel it. The first course arrived, seared scallops with truffle foam and microgreens that cost more per ounce than gold. Graham barely tasted it. He was too busy savoring the victory, the knowledge that he'd won again, that his name would be on buildings that would stand for generations, that he'd turned 400 acres of nothing into a legacy. That's when he saw the boy. At first, Graham thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the heat lamps. But then the shadow moved, and he realized it was a child walking between the tables, small and thin and utterly out of place. The boy couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, dressed in clothes that looked like they'd been assembled from a donation bin, jeans 3 sizes too big, held up with a rope belt, a t-shirt so faded the design was illegible, a jacket that might have been blue once but had faded to gray. No shoes. His feet were bare and dirty, the soles dark with grime. His skin was deep brown, his hair was grown out and uncombed, and his eyes, even from a distance, held something Graham couldn't quite name. Not fear, not defiance, something older, something that didn't belong in a child's face. The boy moved with purpose, scanning the tables as if looking for something specific. Or someone. Jesus Christ, Marcus muttered. How the hell did that get in here? Patricia's hand moved toward her purse, where Graham knew she kept pepper spray. Craig sat up straighter, his wine fog clearing. Simone was already calculating the PR nightmare of a homeless child wandering into their celebration. Dr. Howell looked uncomfortable, as if poverty might be contagious. Vanessa, for the first time all evening, looked up from her phone. The boys stopped at their table. Up close, Graham could see the dirt under his fingernails, the hollow look that came from missing meals, the slight tremor in his hands that might have been cold or fear or hunger. The boy's eyes fixed on Graham's wheelchair, then moved to his face. "Sir," the boy said quietly. His voice was steady despite everything. "I can help with your leg." The table went silent. Then Marcus laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made the boy flinch. "You've got to be kidding me," Marcus said. "Security!" A man in a black suit materialized from the shadows near the entrance. Sterling Oaks kept security subtle but present, ready to handle situations exactly like this. But Graham held up his hand. He was curious now, in the way you might be curious about a strange insect you found in your house just before you crush it. "Help with my leg," Graham repeated slowly. "What makes you think there's anything wrong with my leg?" The boy's eyes didn't waver. "You're holding it different. And you shifted 4 times since I walked up. The way people do when they're trying not to show pain." Graham felt something cold settle in his chest. The observation was too precise, too clinical. "And I suppose you know what's wrong with it." "I might." Marcus laughed again. "This is insane. We're sitting here listening to a homeless kid diagnose." "I'm not homeless," the boy interrupted quietly. "I just don't have a house right now." "There's a difference?" Craig asked, finding this hilarious. "Yes," the boy said simply. "One's about a place. The other's about being a person." Graham studied the child more carefully. Despite the dirt and the hunger and the bare feet, there was something in the way he carried himself, something in the precision of his words. Intelligence. Real intelligence, not the street-smart hustle you'd expect. "What's your name?" Graham asked. "Jalen Brooks?" "Well, Jalen Brooks. I've had 4 specialists look at my leg. Harvard-trained doctors. People who've spent decades studying medicine. What makes you think you know something they don't?" Jalen hesitated, and Graham saw him glance toward the side of the building where the kitchen entrance was, where the dumpsters probably sat. "I found something," Jalen said finally. "In the recycling, medical journal pages. They were torn, but I read them." The table erupted in laughter. Even Vanessa smiled. "He read medical journals," Patricia said. "From the trash. This is the best entertainment we've had all night." But something in Graham's mind caught on a detail. "The recycling? You were going through Sterling Oaks trash?" Jalen's chin lifted slightly. "The recycling. There's a difference. And I wasn't making a mess. I was looking for bottles to return." "And you just happened to find medical journals?" "Yes, sir. Someone tore pages out. I don't know why, but I read them before I came in." Graham's amusement was souring into something darker. The audacity of this child, walking into his celebration, interrupting his moment, making claims based on literal garbage. He felt the anger rising, the same anger that had helped him crush the Hendersons, that had turned competitors into cautionary tales. "Tell you what, Jalen Brooks," Graham said, his voice taking on a silky edge that his business rivals knew to fear. "I'm going to make you a deal. You tell me what's wrong with my leg right now in front of everyone, and if you're right, I'll give you $1 million. Cash. Tonight. The boy's eyes widened. Around the table, Graham saw his guests lean forward. This was getting interesting. But, Graham continued, when you're wrong, and you will be wrong, I'm going to have you arrested for trespassing. Security's going to call the police, and they're going to take you away. And I'm going to make sure you spend tonight in juvenile detention, thinking about what happens when you waste important people's time. Graham, Dr. Howell said quietly, this is a child. This is a con artist in training, Graham snapped. Learning early how to scam people with sympathy. Better he learns now what happens when you try to run games on your betters. Jalen stood very still. Graham could see him thinking, weighing options. The smart move would be to apologize and run, take the escape while it was offered, but the boy didn't move. I need to ask you questions first, Jalen said. About the symptoms. No, Graham said flatly. You claim you know what's wrong. Prove it, or run, and we'll call it even. Marcus grinned. This is better than the land deal. Simone had her phone out, recording. This would make a hell of a story for the right outlets. Billionaire versus trash diving kid. The optics were terrible, but Graham didn't care. He was tired of people not knowing their place, tired of the world telling him he had to pretend everyone was equal when clearly they weren't. Jalen took a breath. His hands had stopped trembling. The journals I found, he said slowly, they were about compartment syndrome, but not the acute kind from trauma, the chronic kind, exertional, except there was a case study about a variant that presents like neuromuscular disorder. It's rare. Most doctors miss it because the symptoms look autoimmune. Graham felt something shift in his chest. The boy was using real terminology, not guessing, not throwing out random medical words. The pain, Jalen continued, his voice gaining confidence. It probably gets worse with activity but doesn't fully go away at rest. Burns from deep inside. Sometimes your foot feels numb or tingly. The tests came back unclear because it's not inflammation, it's pressure. The fascial compartment in your anterior leg is too tight. It's compressing everything. The table had gone quiet again, but this time the laughter was gone. And how, Graham said slowly, would you know this? The journal pages describe the diagnostic criteria. And the treatment. Treatment. Graham's voice was flat. There's a treatment. Yes, sir. Manual release. Takes about 20 seconds if you do it right. There's a specific trigger point about... He stopped because Graham had started laughing. Not the amused laugh from before. Something harder, meaner. Manual release, Graham repeated. You're telling me that 4 Harvard-trained specialists missed a condition that can be fixed in 20 seconds by pressing on my leg? Yes, sir. This is the con, Marcus said. He's going to offer to fix it, take the money, and when it doesn't work, he'll say Graham didn't give him a fair chance. But Jalen shook his head. I said if I'm right, you'd give me money, but I didn't say I wanted it. That stopped everyone. Graham stared at the boy. Then what do you want? School, Jalen said simply. Real school. Not the one I went to before we lost our place. Somewhere that teaches real medicine. Because if I'd known this before, maybe I could have... He stopped, something painful crossing his face. Maybe things would be different. Graham felt the anger crystallize into something sharp and purposeful. This child was making him feel something he hated. Uncertainty. The possibility that he was wrong, that his specialists were wrong, that a homeless 9-year-old had seen something they'd all missed. He couldn't allow it. Here's what's going to happen, Graham said coldly. You're going to try your little trick. Right here, right now. And when nothing happens, security's going to... His leg locked. Not gradually. Not with warning. One moment he was sitting normally, and the next his entire left leg went rigid, seized in a spasm so sudden and complete that he gasped. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming, like someone had driven a spike through his thigh and was twisting it. His leg straightened involuntarily, the foot pointing down, the whole limb locked in a position that was wrong, that his body was screaming was wrong. Graham? Patricia was on her feet. He couldn't speak. The pain was beyond anything the past 3 weeks had produced. His vision blurred. He gripped the armrests of his wheelchair so hard his knuckles went white. Call an ambulance, Dr. Howell barked, moving toward Graham. Now! Marcus already had his phone out. Craig was standing, knocking over his wine. Vanessa looked terrified. Simone kept recording, her journalist instincts overriding everything else. Dr. Howell's hands moved over Graham's leg. Careful, professional. It's locked. Complete spasm. I've never seen... Graham, can you hear me? Graham nodded, teeth clenched. The pain was so intense he thought he might vomit. Ambulance is 30 minutes out, Marcus said, his face pale. They're coming from the county hospital. That's the closest. 30 minutes? Patricia's voice went shrill. He can't wait 30 minutes. Dr. Howell looked helpless. I don't know what this is. If I give him a muscle relaxant without knowing the cause, let me try. Everyone turned. Jalen hadn't moved. He stood exactly where he'd been, watching Graham with those two old eyes. Absolutely not, Dr. Howell said. We're not letting a child... 30 minutes, Jalen said quietly. That's how long before help gets here. The journal said this kind of seizure can cause permanent damage if it goes longer than 45 minutes. Nerve death. You'd lose the leg. Graham heard the words through the pain. Lose the leg. His leg. The thought was so enormous, so terrifying, that for a moment it cut through even the agony. He's guessing, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. He knew, Vanessa whispered. Dad, he knew exactly what would happen. Howell looked at Graham. I can't recommend... Do it, Graham gasped. The words cost him everything. His pride, his certainty, his carefully constructed superiority. Let him try. Sir, if he's wrong, then I'm no worse than I am now. Do it. Security had arrived, 2 men in black suits. Dr. Howell waved them back. Give us space. Everyone, step back. Jalen moved forward. Up close, Graham could see how young he really was. Baby fat still softening his cheeks. Growth spurts in his future. A child who should be home doing homework, not standing in a billionaire's crisis making impossible claims. I need to wash my hands first, Jalen said. Someone, Patricia maybe, made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. A waiter appeared with a basin of water and a clean towel. Jalen washed methodically, the way Graham imagined surgeons did. When he was done, he dried his hands and knelt beside the wheelchair. This is going to hurt more before it helps, Jalen said, looking up at Graham. The release point is deep. I have to press hard. It'll feel like the worst part of the pain, but concentrated. Worse than what you're feeling now. Just do it, Graham ground out. Jalen's hands moved over the leg, gentle at first, searching. His fingers were small and cold and surprisingly steady. He found a spot about 6 inches below Graham's knee, on the outside of his leg, and pressed. Graham screamed. It was involuntary, a sound ripped from somewhere animal and raw. The pain was white-hot, blinding, total, worse than the seizure, worse than anything in his life. He tried to jerk away, but the leg wouldn't move, locked solid, and Jalen's hand stayed firm. Count, Jalen said calmly. Everyone count, loud. It helps. 1, Vanessa's voice shaking. 2. The table joined in, uncertain, mechanical. 3, 4, 5. Graham couldn't hear them over the roaring in his ears. His hands were slipping on the armrests, slick with sweat. His heart was trying to break through his ribs. 10, 11, 12. Jalen adjusted his grip slightly, pressing at a different angle. The pain shifted, changed somehow. Still unbearable, but moving, as if something was sliding inside the muscle. 15, 16, 17. And then, at 18 seconds exactly, Graham felt it release. Not gradually, all at once, like a door that had been jammed suddenly swinging open. The rigid lock in his leg simply vanished. The muscle went soft. The pain dropped from unbearable to merely awful to tolerable in the space of 3 heartbeats. He could move his leg. He flexed his foot, barely believing it. The movement was his own again, not locked, not seized. The burning pain that had been his constant companion for 3 weeks was gone, just gone. In its place was a deep ache, the kind you got after intense exercise, but compared to what he'd been living with, it felt like nothing. Jalen sat back on his heels, breathing hard. His hands were shaking again. The terrace was absolutely silent, except for the string lights humming in the wind. Graham stared at his leg, then at the boy, then at his leg again. "How?" he whispered. Jalen wiped his forehead with his sleeve. The journal explained it. Chronic exertional compartment syndrome with acute fascial herniation. The pressure builds up until the tissue herniates through the fascia, and that's when it locks. But if you release it manually before tissue death, it resolves. Usually doesn't come back if you do physical therapy after. Dr. Howell was examining Graham's leg with hands that shook. The mobility is back, full range of motion. I don't understand. How did you know where to press? The journal had diagrams, anatomical markers. I have a good memory. A good memory, Marcus repeated faintly. Graham tried to stand. His leg held, trembling, uncertain, but it held. He hadn't been able to put full weight on it in 2 weeks. Now he was standing, actually standing, without the wheelchair between him and the ground. The terrace erupted. Not in laughter this time, in chaos. Everyone talking at once, phones out, recording, calling people. Simone was already typing frantically on her phone, the story of the decade unfolding in real time. Dr. Howell was asking Jalen rapid-fire questions that the boy answered with calm precision. Craig was demanding to know how this was possible. Patricia was crying, though Graham couldn't imagine why. Vanessa pushed through to her father and hugged him hard, and Graham realized with distant surprise that she'd been afraid for him. Actually afraid. Marcus appeared at his elbow, holding the checkbook. "The bet. You said $1 million if he was right." Graham looked at Jalen. The boy hadn't moved, still kneeling by the wheelchair, looking small and dirty and impossibly young. $1 million. Graham had promised, in front of witnesses, on camera. He took the checkbook, wrote the amount with a hand that barely shook, signed his name with the flourish that had sealed $100 million deals. He tore the check free and held it out to Jalen. The boy looked at it for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "I don't want it." The terrace went quiet again. "You don't want it," Graham repeated slowly. "No, sir. I told you, I want school. I want to learn real medicine. I want to understand how bodies work so I can help people who need it. People who get ignored because they look wrong or sound wrong or don't have money. People like my mom." Something in the way he said "my mom" made Graham's chest tighten. "What happened to your mother?" Jalen's jaw worked. "She got sick. We went to the emergency room. They made us wait because we didn't have insurance. She waited 6 hours. When they finally saw her, it was too late. Ruptured appendix. They said if she'd been seen sooner..." He stopped, swallowed. "That was 8 months ago." The silence on the terrace was complete now. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. After that, we lost our apartment. My dad tried, but he was already working 2 jobs and taking care of Mom before. He couldn't hold it together. Last month, I don't know where he went. Just woke up one morning and he was gone, so I've been figuring it out on my own." Graham felt something crack inside his chest. Not his heart. He didn't believe in that kind of sentimentality. But something. Some certainty about how the world worked, about who mattered and who didn't. "You're 9 years old," Vanessa said softly. "You've been on your own for a month?" "I'm careful. I stay out of sight. I know which places give away food at closing, which shelters are safe. I've been okay." "You're barefoot," Patricia pointed out, her voice breaking. Jalen looked down at his feet as if just remembering them. "I had shoes. Someone took them last week while I was sleeping. It's okay. My feet are tough now." Dr. Howell cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority Graham had never heard from him. "That journal article you found, can you describe it? The exact title, the authors, if you remember?" Jalen closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was different, flat, reciting. "Atypical presentation of chronic exertional compartment syndrome with acute fascial herniation, a case series. Authors Chen, Patel, and Morrison. Journal of Orthopedic Medicine, Volume 47, Issue 3, published last month. The key diagnostic criteria were Stop." Dr. Howell's face had gone pale. "I know that article. It's cutting-edge research. hasn't even been widely distributed yet. And you read it once, from torn pages, and remembered enough to diagnose and treat? I remember everything I read, Jalen said simply. I always have. My mom used to say it was my superpower. Graham's mind was racing, adding up impossible things. A 9-year-old with photographic memory, living on the streets, diagnosing rare conditions from journal articles found in recycling bins. Treating a billionaire with nothing but his bare hands and knowledge pulled from trash. Making Graham look foolish in front of his inner circle by being right when every specialist had been wrong. Making Graham feel small by refusing $1 million because money wasn't what he needed. Someone cleared their throat. Graham turned to find a woman he didn't recognize standing at the edge of their group. She was perhaps 50, dressed casually in jeans and a blazer, her gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried herself with quiet authority. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. "I'm Dr. Elaine Porter. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I was having dinner 2 tables over. I heard everything, and I need to say something." "Please," Graham managed. Dr. Porter moved to where she could see both Graham and Jalen. "That article the boy mentioned, I'm peer reviewing it. It hasn't been published yet. It's in pre-publication circulation to select specialists. And the treatment protocol is exactly what he described, down to the 18-second release window." She looked at Jalen with something like wonder. "How many times did you read those pages?" "Once," Jalen said. "Once. Torn pages. From a recycling bin." "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Porter crouched down to Jalen's level. "Son, do you understand what you just did? You diagnosed a condition that's so rare most doctors will never see it in their entire careers. You executed a treatment that requires precision and confidence, and you did it after reading about it once, from incomplete information, under pressure." She paused. "You're not just smart. You're exceptional. Prodigy level exceptional." "I just remembered what I read," Jalen said quietly. "No." Dr. Porter's voice was firm. "You did more than remember. You applied it. You made connections. You had the courage to act when everyone was telling you you were wrong. That's not just memory. That's genius." She stood and turned to face Graham. Her expression was no longer kind. "And you," she said, her voice dropping 20 degrees, "we're going to have him arrested." Graham felt the weight of every eye on the terrace. His leg was working again because of this child. His pain was gone because of this child, and he threatened to have him locked up for daring to offer help. "I didn't know," Graham started. "You didn't care," Dr. Porter cut him off. "You saw a homeless child and assumed he was worthless. You bet $1 million not because you believed in fairness, but because you were certain he'd fail and you'd get to punish him for embarrassing you. You were prepared to send a 9-year-old genius to juvenile detention because he interrupted your party." Graham had no answer. Around him, his inner circle was silent. Even Marcus, who could argue his way through anything, said nothing. Dr. Porter looked at Jalen. "Do you have anywhere to stay tonight?" Jalen hesitated. "There's a shelter on 4th Street. If I get there before 9, they usually have space." "No," Dr. Porter said flatly. "Absolutely not. You're coming home with me tonight. Tomorrow we're going to figure out something permanent. And I'm going to make some calls to people I know at the university. Because you need to be in school, real school, the kind that recognizes what you are." "I can't pay you," Jalen said. "I'm not asking you to pay. I'm asking you to let someone help you for once." She held out her hand. "Is that okay?" Jalen looked at her hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and took it. Graham watched them, this woman and child, and felt the night crystallizing into something that would define him. Not the land deal, not the empire. This moment, right here, where he'd been given a choice between his pride and doing something right. "Wait," he said. Dr. Porter turned, her expression making it clear that anything he said better be worth hearing. Graham looked at Jalen, really looked at him, saw past the dirt and the bare feet and the clothes that didn't fit, saw a child who'd lost everything, who'd survived alone, who'd taught himself medicine from garbage and had the courage to use it to help a stranger who'd treated him like trash. Saw someone who could be great, if the world didn't crush him first. "The school," Graham said, "the real school you want. I'll pay for it, all of it. Through medical school if that's where you want to go. Full scholarship, no strings attached. Jalen's eyes widened. Why? Because you saved my leg. Probably saved me from months of surgeries and possible amputation. Because you're brilliant and you deserve better than shelters and recycling bins. Graham paused, then said the hardest words he'd ever spoken. And because I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. And I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air. Graham wasn't sure he'd ever apologized to anyone before. Not genuinely. Dr. Porter studied him with sharp eyes. Pretty words, but I need to know you mean them. This boy's already been abandoned once. He doesn't need another adult making promises they won't keep. I mean them, Graham said. He turned to Marcus. Draw up the papers. Educational trust fund. Enough to cover private school, college, medical school, everything. Make it ironclad. Marcus blinked. That's going to be several $1,000,000. Then it's several $1,000,000. Do it. Tonight? Tonight. Now. I want it ready for signature before we leave this terrace. Marcus moved away, already on his phone with their legal team. Graham turned back to Jalen, who was looking at him with an expression that might have been hope. Graham wasn't sure. He'd spent so long not caring about hope that he'd forgotten what it looked like. There's one condition, Graham added. Dr. Porter's expression hardened. Of course there is. Nothing bad. I want updates. Monthly reports on how you're doing, what you're learning, how you're progressing. Not to check up on you, to learn from you, because tonight you taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. What's that? Jalen asked quietly. That worth has nothing to do with where you sleep or what you're wearing. That intelligence doesn't wait for permission, and that sometimes the people who look the least important are the ones who can change everything. Graham met the boy's eyes. You changed everything tonight, my leg, my evening, maybe my life. The least I can do is make sure you get the chance to keep changing things. Simone was still recording. Tomorrow this would be everywhere. Billionaire humbled by homeless child prodigy, life saved by genius found in recycling bin. Graham should care about the optics, about how it would play, about what his competitors would say. He found he didn't. What he cared about was the slow, uncertain smile spreading across Jalen Brooks' face, the first smile he'd shown all night. Okay, Jalen said softly. Thank you. I'll work really hard. I promise. I know you will. Graham looked at Dr. Porter. Will you help? Make sure he gets into the right programs, has the support he needs. I was planning to whether you paid or not, Dr. Porter said, but her expression had softened slightly. But yes, I'll help. He's going to need mentorship, structure, people who understand what he's capable of. Whatever he needs, whatever it costs. Vanessa moved to stand beside her father. I want to help too. I can tutor him. Help him catch up on whatever he's missed. Patricia nodded. I know people on the board at Westfield Academy, best private school in the state. I can make calls. Craig, slightly more sober now, cleared his throat. My wife runs a foundation that provides supplies and support for gifted students. I'll get Jalen set up. Even Dr. Howell stepped forward. I'll coordinate his medical care. Make sure he's healthy, caught up on vaccinations, everything. Graham watched his inner circle rally around this child they'd been laughing at 30 minutes ago. Watched them see what he'd finally seen. Worth, potential. A life that mattered. Marcus returned with papers already drafted, his legal team having worked at speed that would have cost a fortune in overtime if Graham cared about such things. He spread the documents across the table, and Graham read through them carefully. Trust fund, educational expenses, living stipend, medical care, everything a child would need to build a future. He signed with the same pen he'd used to sign the land deal earlier. 2 signatures tonight that would define him, one for buildings, one for a boy. He knew which one mattered more. It's done, Graham said, handing the papers to Dr. Porter. Legally binding. The trust activates tomorrow morning. Jalen was crying now, silent tears tracking through the dirt on his face. Dr. Porter put her arm around him, and he leaned into her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission to stop being strong. Can I ask you something? Graham said quietly. Jalen nodded, wiping his eyes. How did you know it would work? The treatment. You'd never done it before. What if you'd been wrong? Jalen took a shaky breath. I wasn't wrong. The journal was clear. The anatomy made sense, and you needed help. He paused. My mom died because people didn't help when they should have. I wasn't going to let that happen again if I could stop it. The words hit Graham like a physical blow. This child who'd lost everything, who'd been failed by every system meant to protect him, had seen a stranger in pain and helped. Not for money, not for reward. Because it was right. Graham had spent his whole life taking, building, winning, accumulating. He'd thought that made him strong, important, worth something. Tonight a 9-year-old had shown him what actual worth looked like. I'm going to do something else, Graham said suddenly. Dr. Porter, that clinic work you mentioned, you do free clinics sometimes, right? When I can. Resources are limited. Not anymore. I'm going to fund a free clinic. Full-time, permanent. Somewhere people like Jalen's mother can go when they need help. Somewhere that doesn't turn people away because they can't pay. Somewhere that listens. Dr. Porter's eyebrows rose. Do you know what that would cost? I don't care what it costs. Can you run it? I could assemble a team, but Graham, this is a massive undertaking. Then it's a good thing I'm good at massive undertakings. Graham looked at Jalen. What was your mother's name? Angela, Jalen whispered. Angela Brooks. Then it'll be called the Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic. So her name means something. So what happened to her matters. So other people get the help she deserved. Jalen made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Dr. Porter's eyes were wet. You're serious, she said. Completely. Marcus will work out the details with you, but I want it open within 6 months. Can you do that? Dr. Porter looked at Jalen, then back at Graham. Yes. Yes, we can do that. The terrace had filled with people now, other diners drawn by the commotion, staff gathering at the edges. Even the chef had come out from the kitchen. They'd all witnessed it, this strange miracle that had unfolded over scallops and scotch. By morning, it would be everywhere. Graham didn't care. What he cared about was watching Jalen Brooks, 9 years old and barefoot, being wrapped in Dr. Porter's coat, being offered food from the kitchen, which he accepted with the careful gratitude of someone who'd known real hunger, being introduced to people who wanted to help, who saw what Graham had almost missed, a life worth saving, worth investing in, worth everything. The check for $1 million still sat on the table, unclaimed. Graham picked it up and handed it to Dr. Porter. For the clinic, seed money while we set up proper funding. She took it without argument. This is a good thing you're doing. It's the least I can do. The very least. Graham looked at Jalen, who was halfway through a plate of food someone had brought him. He deserved better than what the world gave him. I'm just trying to balance the scales a little. You're doing more than that. You're changing his life. He changed mine first. And it was true. Graham could feel it, the shift inside him, the certainty he'd always carried, that he was better, that he deserved more, that success meant crushing everyone in his path, had cracked. In its place was something uncomfortable and new, responsibility, connection, the understanding that his power was meaningless if he used it only for himself. The evening continued around them, but it was a different gathering now, not a celebration of conquest, something more like a witness, a group of people who'd seen impossible things and been changed by them. By midnight, Marcus had drafted preliminary plans for the clinic. Patricia had secured Jalen a spot at Westfield Academy starting the following Monday. Vanessa had already ordered clothes and shoes in Jalen's size from 3 different stores, express delivery. Craig had his wife on the phone, setting up mentorship programs. Dr. Howell was examining Jalen with gentle thoroughness, making lists of specialists he should see. And Dr. Porter sat with Jalen, talking quietly about what came next. School, stability, a future that looked like something other than survival. Graham watched from his wheelchair, which he realized he'd barely needed all evening, and felt something settling into place. Not redemption. He didn't deserve that yet, but purpose, direction, a sense that maybe his life could mean something beyond buildings and bank accounts. Sir? Jalen appeared at his elbow, small and uncertain. You don't have to call me sir, Graham said. Graham's fine. Okay, Graham. Jalen paused. Why did you really do it? The scholarship and the clinic and everything. Dr. Porter says it's a lot of money, like more than most people make in their whole lives. Graham considered lying, saying something about tax breaks or public relations or investment in the future, but Jalen deserved better than lies. "Because tonight I was ready to destroy you for embarrassing me," Graham said honestly. "I was going to have you arrested, maybe get you put in the system where you'd be lost forever, just because you dared to interrupt my victory party. And then you saved my leg, saved me, despite knowing what I was planning to do to you. And I realized I'd spent my whole life being the kind of person who would do that, who would see someone like you and think you were nothing." He met Jalen's eyes. "I don't want to be that person anymore. And maybe if I can help you, if I can build something that helps people instead of just making me richer, maybe I can become someone different, someone better." Jalen studied him with those two old eyes. "My mom used to say everyone can change if they really want to. I wasn't sure I believed her." "Do you believe her now?" "I think so, maybe, if you keep your promises." "I will," Graham said. "I promise you that. And Jalen, thank you for tonight, for showing me things I needed to see, for being brave enough to help even when you knew it might go badly." Jalen's smile was shy but real. "You're welcome." Dr. Porter collected him shortly after, promising to call tomorrow with updates, to work with Graham's team on the logistics. Jalen waved goodbye from the parking lot, already looking different somehow, lighter, as if hope had physical weight and its absence left you more buoyant. Graham's inner circle dispersed slowly, each of them changed in small ways by what they'd witnessed. Simone's story would run in the morning, but she'd promised to focus on Jalen's brilliance in the clinic rather than Graham's initial cruelty, a gift Graham didn't deserve but accepted gratefully. By the time Sterling Oaks closed for the night, Graham sat alone on the terrace, his leg working perfectly, his mind spinning with plans for clinics and scholarships and ways to turn wealth into something that mattered. The string lights still glowed amber. The valley lights still stretched below, but everything looked different now. Not because the view had changed, because he had. A homeless 9-year-old boy had walked onto this terrace, barefoot and desperate. And somehow, in the space of one evening, he'd healed more than Graham's leg. He'd healed something Graham hadn't known was broken. Graham didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until dawn, his laptop open, researching pediatric education programs and medical prodigies, and the statistics on homeless children in America. The numbers were staggering. On any given night, more than 500,000 children had no stable place to sleep. Most would never escape the cycle. Most would never get the chance Jalen was getting. Most didn't have photographic memories or the courage to walk into a billionaire's party and demand to be heard, but they all deserved better than what they were getting. By 6 in the morning, Graham had filled 3 legal pads with notes and ideas. Marcus would think he'd lost his mind when he saw them. Maybe he had. The man who'd gone to Sterling Oaks last night wouldn't recognize the plans taking shape now. Free clinics weren't just good PR, they were necessary. Educational programs for gifted children from low-income families weren't charity. They were investment in the future. Housing programs, job training, mental health services, all of it interconnected. All of it designed to catch people before they fell through the cracks the way Angela Brooks had. The way her son nearly did. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Porter. A photo. Jalen asleep in what looked like a guest bedroom, clean pajamas replacing the torn clothes, his face peaceful in a way Graham suspected it hadn't been in months. The caption read, "First real sleep in weeks. He ate 3 plates of food and took a 40-minute shower. Thank you for making this possible." Graham stared at that photo for a long time. Then he forwarded it to Marcus with a message. "This is what matters now. Make sure I don't forget." By Monday morning, Sterling Oaks felt like a fever dream. But the video Simone had posted was very real and very viral. 12 million views in 3 days. The comments ranged from inspired to skeptical to angry that it had taken a child nearly dying on the streets to make a billionaire care about anyone but himself. Graham read them all, even the ones that called him a monster, especially those. His assistant Julia fielded hundreds of interview requests. Every major network wanted the story. Morning shows, podcasts, documentary producers, book agents representing people who wanted to write about Jalen's gift. Graham declined them all with the same message. The story isn't about me. Talk to Dr. Porter about the clinic. Talk to Westfield Academy about their scholarship program. Leave Jalen alone to be a kid. That last part was the hardest sell. People were fascinated by the boy genius, wanted to see him, test him, prove he was real. Graham's legal team worked overtime, sending cease and desist letters to reporters who tried to approach Jalen at his new school. On Tuesday, Graham visited Westfield Academy for the first time. The campus sprawled across 40 acres of manicured grounds, all brick buildings and oak trees and the quiet confidence of an institution that had been educating the children of the wealthy for over a century. The headmaster, Dr. Caroline Weber, met him in her office with the careful courtesy reserved for major donors. "Mr. Carrington, we're honored to have Jalen joining us. Patricia Ewan spoke very highly of both of you." "I want to make sure he's getting what he needs," Graham said, skipping the pleasantries. "Not just academically, socially, emotionally. This is a big change for him." Dr. Weber nodded, her expression thoughtful. She was in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "We've placed him with our most experienced fourth-grade teacher, Mrs. Chen. She has a gift for integrating students from diverse backgrounds. We've also assigned him a peer mentor and scheduled weekly sessions with our school counselor." "Is that standard? For students transitioning from difficult circumstances?" "Yes. We want him to feel supported, not overwhelmed." "Can I see his classroom?" Dr. Weber checked her watch. "They're in session now, but we can observe from the hall if you'd like." She led him through corridors lined with art projects and trophy cases, past a library that looked like something from Oxford, to a bright classroom where 20 students sat in clusters around tables instead of traditional rows. Graham spotted Jalen immediately, sitting with 3 other children, all of them bent over what looked like a science experiment. He was wearing new clothes, khakis and a navy polo shirt with the Westfield crest. His hair had been cut. He looked clean and fed and remarkably normal, just another 4th grader working on a project. Except Graham could see the difference. The way Jalen's hand moved across the paper, writing with absolute certainty while the other students consulted their textbooks. The way he explained something to the girl next to him, patient and clear. The way Mrs. Chen watched him with a mixture of fascination and careful assessment. "How's he doing?" Graham asked quietly. "Academically, he's extraordinary. We tested him last Friday across all subjects. His reading comprehension is college level. His math skills are 9th grade at minimum. Science knowledge is scattered but deep where he's encountered material. He can explain cellular respiration but doesn't know basic astronomy." "And socially?" Dr. Weber's expression softened. "That's harder. He's polite, quiet. He follows every rule precisely, but he hasn't really connected with the other children yet. He eats lunch alone. During recess, he reads in the library." Graham's chest tightened. "Is he being bullied?" "No, nothing like that. I think he doesn't know how to be a child his own age. He's been surviving on his own for so long, he's forgotten how to just play." "What can we do?" "Time," Dr. Weber said simply, "and patience. We're working on it. Mrs. Chen pairs him with different students each day. We've encouraged him to join after-school activities. Dr. Porter suggested art therapy, which starts Thursday." Graham watched Jalen complete the experiment, then help the other students understand their results. The teacher praised his work, and Jalen ducked his head, embarrassed by the attention. "He's special," Dr. Weber said. "Not just the genius part. There's a kindness in him, a desire to help. Most children his age are still completely self-focused, but Jalen notices when others are struggling and moves to help without being asked. His mother taught him that. Then she did something right." Dr. Weber paused. "We'll take good care of him, Mr. Carrington. You have my word." "Thank you." Graham turned from the window. "I want to fund more scholarships. For kids like Jalen. Kids who are brilliant but poor, who'd never get a chance otherwise." Dr. Weber's eyebrows rose. "That's a significant commitment. I have significant resources. How many kids could you take? If money wasn't an obstacle." She considered. "We could expand our scholarship program to cover perhaps 20 students per grade level. That's 160 children across the school. The facilities are there. We just need to hire more support staff, increase our financial aid budget, possibly build another dormitory for students from outside the immediate area." "Let's do it, all of it." Graham pulled out his phone and messaged Marcus. "My team will reach out this week to discuss logistics. I want the program running by next fall." "Mr. Carrington, this is extraordinarily generous, but I need to ask, Why? What changed? Graham looked back through the window at Jalen, who was now demonstrating something with a beaker, his face lit with the kind of pure joy that came from understanding how things worked. I spent 50 years building an empire and stepping on anyone who got in my way, Graham said quietly. Then a 9-year-old showed me that real power is using what you have to lift other people up. I'm just trying to catch up. That afternoon, Graham met with Dr. Porter and her assembled team for the first planning session for the Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic. They gathered in a conference room at Graham's main office, a space designed to intimidate with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Dr. Porter arrived with 5 other medical professionals, all of them looking slightly overwhelmed by the surroundings. She introduced them efficiently. Dr. James Patterson, an internal medicine specialist who'd worked in free clinics for 20 years. Dr. Sarah Kim, a pediatrician with a passion for underserved populations. Nurse practitioner Michael Torres, who'd grown up in the neighborhoods they planned to serve. Dr. David Chen, a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma. And Maria Gonzalez, a social worker who knew every resource in the city. "Thank you all for coming," Graham said, trying to put them at ease. "I know this is unusual. Most clinic planning doesn't happen in corner offices." "Most clinic planning doesn't have unlimited funding," Dr. Patterson said dryly. He was in his 60s, with weathered hands and the kind of calm competence that came from decades of difficult work. "Dr. Porter said you were serious about this, but I'll admit I was skeptical until I walked in here." "I'm serious. What do you need?" For the next 3 hours, they talked. Not about money. Graham had made it clear that budget constraints weren't a factor, but about mission and approach and the specific needs of the community they wanted to serve. Dr. Kim talked about children who went without basic vaccinations because their parents couldn't afford to miss work for clinic appointments. Michael Torres described patients who avoided seeking care until emergencies because they feared deportation or couldn't navigate the insurance system. Dr. Chen explained how trauma and poverty created mental health crises that traditional medicine ignored. Maria Gonzalez painted the clearest picture. People come to emergency rooms because they have nowhere else to go. They wait hours, sometimes get turned away, often can't afford the treatment even if they're seen. By the time they're sick enough that hospitals have to treat them regardless of ability to pay, conditions that could have been handled with a simple antibiotic or a blood pressure medication have become life-threatening. We don't need fancier hospitals. We need accessible care at the front end before people get desperate. "That's what happened to Angela Brooks," Graham said quietly. "That's what happens to thousands of people every year in this city alone," Maria confirmed. "And it's preventable, completely preventable if we can create systems that catch people early." Dr. Porter spread architectural plans across the conference table. "I've been looking at potential locations. There's a closed grocery store on 7th Avenue, right in the heart of the neighborhood that needs us most. 15,000 square feet. It's been vacant for 2 years. The owner is willing to sell." Graham studied the plans. The building was larger than he'd expected, with good bones and parking. "Buy it, whatever he's asking." "Graham, we should negotiate. Buy it, today. Get the paperwork started." He turned to the team. "What else? What do we need to make this work?" Dr. Patterson pulled out a tablet covered in notes. "Medical equipment, obviously. Exam rooms, a small lab for basic blood work, X-ray capabilities, pharmacy partnership for medication access, electronic health record system. But the real key is staffing. We need doctors, nurses, support staff who understand this work and are willing to do it for less than they'd make elsewhere." "Pay them the same as they'd make elsewhere," Graham interrupted. "Better, if possible. I don't want people working here because it's their only option. I want them here because it's where they can do the most good, and I want them to be able to afford to stay." The team exchanged glances. Dr. Kim spoke carefully. "Mr. Carrington, that's admirable, but it's also expensive. Most free clinics survive on volunteer hours and shoestring budgets. Most free clinics fail or burn out their staff. I want this to last, to grow, to become a model that other cities can replicate." Graham leaned forward. "Here's what I'm thinking. We start with 1 clinic, prove the model works. Then we expand. 5 clinics. 10. Eventually a network across the entire city, positioned so that no one is more than 15 minutes from accessible care. That's a 20-year project, Dr. Chen said. Then it's a good thing I'm planning to live at least that long. Graham smiled. And if I don't, the funding will be set up to continue regardless. This isn't a vanity project that dies when I do. This is a permanent institution. Dr. Porter was quiet, studying him with those sharp eyes. You really mean this? Every word. Why? Dr. Patterson asked bluntly. No offense, but you're a real estate developer. This isn't your world. What's driving this? Graham could have deflected. Could have talked about tax benefits or legacy or public image. Instead, he told them the truth. A week ago, I was ready to have a homeless child arrested for interrupting my dinner party. I saw him as a problem to be removed, not a person who mattered. Then he saved my leg using medicine he'd learned from reading journal articles in my restaurant's trash. And I realized I'd spent my whole life being the kind of person who builds empires but ignores people. His mother died because people like me don't care about people like her. I can't bring her back, but I can make sure her death means something, that her son's gift leads to something bigger than both of us. The room was silent. Then Maria Gonzalez smiled, and it transformed her face. Okay, I'm in. Let's build something that matters. One by one, the others nodded. Dr. Porter reached across the table and shook Graham's hand, her grip firm and sure. We're going to hold you to this, she said. All of it. The funding, the commitment, the long-term vision. No backing out when the novelty wears off. I'm counting on it, Graham said. Please hold me accountable. All of you. This is too important to let me fail. By the time the meeting ended, they had a timeline. Purchase the building within 2 weeks, begin renovations immediately, hire core staff by month's end, open the doors in 6 months. Ambitious but possible with unlimited resources and motivated people. Marcus cornered Graham after the team left. Do you understand what you've committed to? The clinic alone is going to cost $15 million in the first year. The scholarship program at Westfield is another $12 million annually. You're talking about restructuring your entire philanthropic approach. I'm talking about restructuring my entire life, Graham corrected. The money's there. It's just been going to things that don't matter. Your shareholders will adjust or they won't, and I'll buy them out. I'm still the majority stakeholder. This is happening, Marcus. His lawyer sighed. You know I have to point out the risks. The legal exposure, the possibility of failure, the chance that people will take advantage of your generosity. Noted. Now make it happen. Marcus smiled despite himself. You're different since that night. I wasn't sure if it would stick, but you're actually different. A 9-year-old called me on my bullshit without saying a word, just by being better than me. That tends to change a person. Well, for what it's worth, I think this is good. What you're doing. Angela Brooks deserved better. So did Jalen. So do a lot of people. Then help me make sure they get it. Wednesday brought unexpected complications. Graham's phone rang at 7 in the morning, Dr. Porter's name on the screen. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Jalen's father showed up. Graham was out of bed immediately. Where? At my house. He's demanding to see Jalen. He says he has parental rights, that I kidnapped his son. Is he threatening you? Not physically, but he's loud. He's clearly been drinking, and he's attracting attention from the neighbors. I've got Jalen in the back room, but he can hear everything. I'm on my way. Don't let the father inside, but don't call the police yet. Give me 20 minutes. Graham dressed faster than he had in years, his mind racing. This was the complication he should have anticipated. Legal custody, parental rights. The fact that Jalen technically wasn't an orphan, just abandoned by a father who'd now apparently changed his mind. He made 2 calls from the car, one to Marcus, getting the legal team mobilized, and one to Vanessa. I need you to do something for me, he told his daughter. Find out everything you can about Dennis Brooks. Employment history, criminal record, financial situation, everything, fast as possible. I'm on it. Dad? Be careful. Custody situations can get ugly. I know. That's why I need ammunition. Dr. Porter's house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people mowed their lawns on schedule and everyone knew everyone else's business. Graham spotted the problem immediately. A man in his late 30s standing on the front lawn, unshaven and agitated, yelling toward the house. "I know he's in there. That's my son. You can't just take someone's kid." Graham approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "Mr. Brooks? I'm Graham Carrington. Can we talk?" Dennis Brooks spun toward him, eyes red-rimmed and wild. "You're the billionaire, the one who's been all over the news with my boy." "I'm the one who's been helping Jalen, yes. He's safe. He's being well cared for." "He doesn't need your care. He needs his father." "The father who abandoned him a month ago?" Graham kept his voice level. "The father who left a 9-year-old alone on the streets while you did what exactly?" Dennis's face flushed. "I had problems. Personal problems. I just needed some time to get my head straight." "So you left your child to fend for himself?" "I was coming back. I always planned to come back." "When? After he froze to death? After someone hurt him? After he starved?" Graham moved closer, dropping his voice so the neighbors couldn't hear. "Do you have any idea what could have happened to him out there alone? Don't you judge me. You don't know what it's like, losing everything, watching your wife die, trying to hold it together when the whole world's falling apart. You're right. I don't know what that's like." Graham softened his tone fractionally. "But I do know that Jalen needed you, and you weren't there. And now he's somewhere safe, with people who care about him, getting an education that will change his life. Why would you want to take that away from him?" "Because he's my son." Dennis's voice cracked. "He's all I have left of her, of Angela. I can't just let him go." Graham studied the man in front of him. He saw desperation there, and grief, and the kind of broken quality that came from losing too much too fast. He also saw selfishness, the need to possess something, to hold on to the last piece of a life that had shattered. "Do you have a place to live?" Graham asked. Dennis hesitated. "I'm staying with a friend." "Do you have a job?" "I'm looking. It's hard right now, economy's tough." "Do you have any way to provide for Jalen? Food, clothes, shelter, medical care, education?" The silence was answer enough. "Here's what I think," Graham said quietly. "I think you love your son. I think losing Angela destroyed you. I think you ran because you couldn't face the responsibility of being a single parent when you were barely holding yourself together. And I think you saw the news coverage and realized that Jalen's life is better now than anything you can give him, and that terrifies you because it means admitting you failed him." But Dennis's hands were shaking. "I'm his father. Being a father is more than biology. It's showing up, providing, protecting, putting your child's needs before your own." Graham paused. "When's the last time you did any of those things? That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is expecting Jalen to give up his chance at a real future because you're feeling guilty and lonely." Graham pulled out his phone, showed Dennis a photo from the school. Jalen in a classroom, smiling at something a classmate said. "Look at him, really look. He's happy, safe, learning, thriving. Can you give him that?" Dennis stared at the photo, and something broke in his face. "No," he whispered. "I can't." "Then let him have it. Let him have the life he deserves." "And what do I get? I just walk away and pretend I don't have a son?" Graham had anticipated this. "You get help, real help. I'll pay for rehab if you need it, job training, housing assistance, therapy to deal with your grief. I'll set you up with everything you need to rebuild your life. And once you're stable, really stable, with a job and a home, and proof that you can take care of yourself, we can talk about supervised visitation. Jalen deserves to know his father, but he deserves a father who's healthy and present, not someone who's going to abandon him again the next time things get hard." Dennis looked toward the house where Jalen was presumably listening to all of this. "He must hate me." "He doesn't. He's worried about you. That's the kind of kid he is. Even after everything, he still cares what happens to you." Graham stepped closer. "Don't make him choose between having a father and having a future. Be the kind of father who wants his son to have both." The fight went out of Dennis all at once. His shoulders sagged, and he looked suddenly older, hollowed out by loss and bad decisions. "What do I have to do?" "Come inside, talk to Jalen. Explain that you love him and you want what's best for him, and right now that means letting Dr. Porter care for him while you get your life together. Then you're going to sign some papers agreeing to temporary guardianship. And tomorrow, you're going to meet with my team and we're going to set you up with the resources you need to heal. Just like that? You're going to fix my whole life? I'm going to give you the tools to fix your own life. Whether you actually do it is up to you. Graham held his gaze. But understand this. If you fail, if you disappear again, or show up drunk, or do anything that hurts that boy, I will use every resource I have to make sure you never get near him again. Jalen's welfare comes first, not your feelings, not your rights. Him. Are we clear? Dennis nodded slowly. Clear. Dr. Porter had been watching from the window. She opened the door as they approached, her expression wary but willing to trust Graham's judgment. Inside, Jalen sat on the couch in the living room, wearing his school uniform, his backpack beside him, as if ready to run if he needed to. When he saw his father, his face went through a complicated series of emotions: hope, fear, anger, love, all tangled together in a way that made Graham's heart ache. "Hey, kiddo," Dennis said, his voice breaking. "You look good. New clothes?" "Dr. Porter took me shopping." Jalen's voice was small. "Where were you?" "I was lost. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Dennis crossed the room and knelt in front of his son. "Your mom dying, it broke something in me. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't be what you needed, so I ran. And that was wrong. That was so wrong." "I waited," Jalen whispered. "Every morning I checked the spots I thought you might look for me. I left notes." "I know. I'm sorry." Dennis was crying now, openly. "But look at you. You're in a good school. You've got people taking care of you. You're going to be a doctor, aren't you? Like you always wanted." Jalen nodded. "Then I'm going to do the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm going to let you have that. Let you stay here with Dr. Porter and go to your fancy school and become everything your mom knew you could be." Dennis took a shaky breath. "But I'm going to get better too. Mr. Carrington's going to help me. And someday when I'm the dad you deserve, maybe we can spend time together again. Would that be okay?" Jalen launched himself into his father's arms, and Dennis held him tight, both of them crying. Graham looked away, giving them privacy, and found Dr. Porter wiping her own eyes. "You handled that well," she murmured. "I threatened him," Graham said quietly. "I don't know if that's well." "You protected Jalen. That's what matters." They let father and son have 20 minutes together. Dennis told Jalen about Angela, shared memories that made them both laugh through tears. He promised to write, to stay in touch, to get healthy. And when Marcus arrived with the temporary guardianship papers, Dennis signed them without hesitation. "Thank you," he said to Dr. Porter as he prepared to leave, "for taking care of him, for being what I couldn't be." "I'm just keeping him safe until you can," Dr. Porter said gently. "But you have to actually do the work, Dennis, for him and for yourself." "I will, I promise." Graham walked Dennis to the car his team had arranged. "Someone will pick you up tomorrow morning at 9. They'll take you to meet with counselors and job placement specialists. Show up, follow through, prove you can be the father Jalen deserves." Dennis nodded, then looked back at the house one more time. "He really is special, isn't he? The way he helped you, the genius thing? He's extraordinary, and he got that from somewhere. From Angela. Maybe from you too. I used to read to him every night, before. Angela and I, we'd take turns. He'd remember every story, every detail. We knew he was different." Dennis's smile was sad. "Take care of him, please." "I will. Now go take care of yourself." After Dennis left, Graham sat with Dr. Porter and Jalen in the quiet living room. The boy was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but there was also relief in his eyes. "Is he really going to get better?" Jalen asked. "I don't know," Graham said honestly. "He's going to get help. Whether he uses it is up to him, but either way, you're safe here. Your future is secure. Whatever happens with your dad doesn't change that." "I want him to be okay. Even after everything, I want that." "That's because you're a good person," Dr. Porter said. "Better than most adults I know." Jalen was quiet for a moment, then looked at Graham. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are you doing all this? The school and the clinic and helping my dad? You didn't have to. You could have just paid for my leg thing, and that would have been enough. Graham considered how to answer. He could talk about guilt or redemption or legacy. Instead, he told the truth. Because you reminded me that people matter more than money, that one life, yours, your mother's, your father's, has more value than all the buildings I've ever built. And because I spent 50 years forgetting that, and I'm trying to remember before it's too late. Jalen nodded slowly, processing this. My mom used to say that everyone has something broken inside them. The question is whether you let it make you mean or whether you use it to understand other people better. Your mother was wise. Yeah, she was. Jalen stood, his backpack over his shoulder. I have homework. Dr. Porter, can I use the desk in my room? Of course, sweetheart. After Jalen disappeared upstairs, Dr. Porter turned to Graham. You know what you've gotten yourself into, right? This isn't a short-term project. Jalen's going to need support for years. So is Dennis. The clinic's going to have challenges you can't anticipate. The scholarship program will face scrutiny. This is a marathon, not a sprint. I know. And you're really ready for that? No backing out when it gets difficult or expensive or when the media attention fades? I'm ready. More than that, I need this. I need to know that my life amounts to more than just accumulating wealth, that I can build something that actually helps people instead of just making me richer. Graham met her eyes. Please don't let me quit. If I start to waver, remind me of tonight, of Jalen asking why I'm doing this, of the answer I want to be able to give him 10 years from now. Dr. Porter extended her hand and they shook on it. A promise, a partnership, a commitment to see this through no matter what came next. Graham drove home through streets that looked different now, populated with people who had stories and struggles and potential he'd never bothered to notice before. How many other Jalens were out there? How many Angela Brooks? How many people falling through cracks that money could easily fill if anyone with money actually cared? His phone buzzed with updates from his team. The Sterling Oaks building purchase was finalized. The Westfield Scholarship Program had its first applicants. 3 more doctors had contacted Dr. Porter wanting to join the clinic team. Small victories. First steps. But they were real steps. Tangible progress. Lives that would be changed because one homeless boy had been brave enough to offer help, and one bitter billionaire had been desperate enough to accept it. Graham pulled into his driveway, the mansion suddenly seeming obscenely large, and sat for a moment in his car. Through the windows, he could see his staff moving through lit rooms, maintaining a house far too big for one person. Tomorrow he'd start looking at downsizing, using the space for something that mattered. Maybe a halfway house for families transitioning out of homelessness. Maybe a training center for medical students from the scholarship program. Maybe something Angela Brooks would have approved of. He thought about her often now, this woman he'd never met. Wondered what she'd been like, what she'd taught her son that made him so extraordinary. Imagined her waiting in that emergency room, knowing something was wrong, being ignored because she didn't have the right insurance or the right address or the right appearance. Dying because no one listened. The clinic would be called Angela Brooks Memorial, but it would be more than a name. It would be a promise that every person who walked through those doors would be heard, seen, valued, that no one else would die because they were deemed unimportant by people with the power to help. Graham's leg, the leg Jalen had healed, no longer hurt at all. The physical therapy Dr. Porter had prescribed was working perfectly. In a few weeks, he'd be walking without any assistance, the wheelchair retired to storage. But the real healing wasn't physical. It was the slow, painful process of becoming someone different, someone better, someone who deserved the second chance a 9-year-old had given him. He got out of the car and walked into his house, already planning tomorrow's meetings, next week's groundbreaking, next month's launches. The work was just beginning, the real work, the kind that didn't end with profit margins and acquisition victories, the kind that might actually matter when all was said and done. 3 months later, Graham stood in the gutted shell of what would become the Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic and wondered if he'd bitten off more than he could chew. The former grocery store on 7th Avenue looked like a war zone. Exposed electrical wiring hung from the ceiling, construction debris covered every surface, and the smell of fresh drywall compound mixed with decades of accumulated dust made his eyes water. Dr. Porter appeared beside him in a hard hat and safety vest, reviewing blueprints with the construction foreman. She'd thrown herself into the project with the kind of fierce dedication that made Graham grateful he'd found her. Every decision, from the layout of exam rooms to the color of the waiting room chairs, was made with patient care in mind. "The pharmacy space is taking longer than expected," she said, pointing to the back corner. "We need reinforced storage for controlled substances, which means extra permitting. Adds 2 weeks to the timeline." "Do what needs to be done," Graham said. "I'd rather open right than open fast." The foreman, a weathered man named Joe Castellano, who'd built half the city's commercial spaces, nodded approvingly. "Smart. I've seen too many medical facilities rush construction and end up with problems that cost triple to fix later." Graham's phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Dad, you need to see this. Turning on the conference room screen now." He excused himself and walked to the temporary office they'd set up in a corner of the construction site. On the large monitor, a news broadcast was playing. The anchor's face was serious as she introduced the segment. 3 months ago, a viral video showed billionaire Graham Carrington being treated by a 9-year-old homeless boy with a photographic memory. Today, we have an exclusive update on both the boy and the revolutionary clinic that's being built in his mother's name. The footage cut to Westfield Academy, showing Jalen in a science lab, carefully pipetting liquid into test tubes while Mrs. Chen supervised. The boy Graham had met barefoot and desperate now looked like any other privileged student, except for the intensity in his eyes as he worked. "Jalen Brooks is thriving at one of the state's most elite private schools," the reporter continued, "where he's already working 2 grade levels ahead in science and mathematics. His teachers say he's not just memorizing information, but making connections that suggest true genius." The camera cut to an interview with Dr. Weber. "Jalen is extraordinary. But what's equally remarkable is watching him develop socially. He started to make friends, to laugh during recess, to be a child again. The transformation has been beautiful to witness." Graham felt his throat tighten. He'd seen Jalen weekly for their scheduled check-ins, had watched the boy slowly emerge from the protective shell survival had forced him to build. Last week, Jalen had told him about joining the school's science club and making a friend named Marcus who also loved chemistry. Small victories that meant everything. The broadcast shifted to show the clinic construction, aerial footage, revealing the scope of the project. But Jalen's story is just the beginning. The Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic, funded entirely by Carrington's personal fortune, is on track to open in May. It will offer free medical care to anyone who needs it, regardless of insurance or immigration status. Dr. Porter appeared on screen standing in front of the construction site. "This clinic represents a fundamental shift in how we think about healthcare access. We're not just treating symptoms, we're building relationships with our community. We'll have social workers on staff, mental health counselors, connection to housing resources. Because you can't heal a body if the person doesn't have food or shelter or safety." The camera returned to the anchor, who shuffled her papers and adopted a more critical tone. "But not everyone is celebrating Carrington's transformation. Critics say this is performative charity from a man who spent decades profiting from gentrification and displacement. Some community activists worry the clinic is the first step in a development scheme to raise property values and push out longtime residents." The screen showed footage of a protest outside Graham's main office. Maybe 30 people with signs reading, "Charity isn't justice," and "We don't want your guilt money." A woman with a megaphone was speaking to the crowd. Graham Carrington built his fortune buying up distressed properties and turning them into luxury developments that people like us can't afford. Now he wants us to thank him for building one clinic? We need systemic change, not billionaire saviors throwing scraps. Graham recognized the speaker. Yolanda Martinez, a well-known community organizer who'd fought against several of his previous developments. She'd been right then, he realized with uncomfortable clarity. Those projects had displaced people, destroyed neighborhoods, prioritized profit over community. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her expression worried. "Dad, do you want me to have the PR team respond?" "No." Graham turned off the monitor. "She's not wrong." "What?" "Miss Martinez, she's right to be skeptical. I have spent decades gentrifying neighborhoods and displacing people. Building one clinic doesn't erase that." He ran a hand through his hair. "But it's a start. And maybe instead of defending myself, I should talk to her. Find out what the community actually needs instead of assuming I know." Vanessa studied him with the same shrewd assessment she used in business negotiations. You're serious? Completely. Can you set up a meeting? Neutral location, no cameras, no PR people. Just me and the community organizers. I want to listen. They might refuse to meet with you. Then I'll keep asking until they don't. Graham looked out at the construction site, at the skeleton of something that could either help or hurt, depending on how it was executed. This can't just be about easing my conscience. It has to actually serve people. And I can't know if it does that unless I ask them. 3 days later, Graham found himself in a church basement in the heart of the neighborhood the clinic would serve. Yolanda Martinez sat across a folding table from him, flanked by 5 other community leaders. The room smelled like coffee and the ghost of 1,000 potluck dinners. No press, no lawyers. Just people who'd lived in this neighborhood, their whole lives facing the man who represented everything that threatened it. Yolanda spoke first, her voice direct and uncompromising. Before we start, I want to be clear. We're not here to make you feel better about yourself. We're here because you said you wanted to listen, and we're willing to give you one chance to prove you mean it. Understood, Graham said. And thank you for meeting with me. Don't thank us yet. She gestured to the others. This is Pastor James Whitfield. He's been serving this community for 30 years. Rosa Delgado, she runs the neighborhood food bank. Miguel Santos, he's a social worker with the school district. Keisha Washington, she's a nurse at County Hospital. And Dr. Frank Morrison, he's been running a volunteer clinic out of his garage for the past decade. Graham nodded to each of them, noting the skepticism in their eyes. These were people who'd seen promises before, who'd watched their neighborhood change around them, always in ways that benefited outsiders. I'll be direct, Yolanda continued. Your clinic. What's to stop it from being the first wave of gentrification? You buy this building, property values in the area go up, taxes increase, longtime residents can't afford to stay. Then suddenly the clinic is serving a completely different population than the one you claim to be helping. That's a valid concern, Graham said. What would prevent that? The question seemed to surprise her. You're asking me? I'm asking all of you. You know this community. You understand the dynamics. What safeguards would make you trust this project? There was a long silence. Then Dr. Morrison leaned forward. He was in his 70s with hands gnarled from arthritis, but eyes that sparkled with intelligence. I've been providing free care for 20 years. You know what I've learned? Medical care is only part of the solution. People need jobs, housing, food security, mental health support. You can cure someone's infection, but if they're going back to a moldy apartment with no heat, they'll just get sick again. So the clinic needs to be part of a larger support system, Graham said. Exactly. But here's the problem. Most wealthy people who try to help end up making things worse because they don't understand what we actually need. They build things that look good but don't function for real people. Rosa Delgado spoke up, her accent thick but her English precise. At the food bank, we see families every week who work full-time jobs but still can't afford groceries. The problem isn't that they're lazy. The problem is that rent keeps going up and wages don't. Your clinic treats them for free, but if they lose their housing, what good does it do? So I need to address housing stability too, Graham said, making notes. Keisha Washington laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. You need to address everything. That's what you're not getting. Poverty isn't one problem. It's 1,000 problems, all interconnected. You can't just fix one piece and call it solved. Pastor Whitfield had been quiet, watching Graham carefully. Now he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decades of pastoral care. Son, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why now? You've been a successful developer for how many years? 30? 40? What changed? Graham thought about lying, about giving them the polished version Simone would write for press releases. Instead, he told them about Sterling Oaks, about Jalen appearing barefoot and hungry, about threatening to have a 9-year-old arrested, about being saved by someone he'd been ready to destroy. I spent my whole life believing that success meant winning, Graham finished, that the world was divided into people who mattered and people who didn't, and I'd earned my place in the first group by being smarter and tougher than everyone else. Then this kid showed me that I'd been wrong about everything, that worth has nothing to do with what you own. that the people I'd been ignoring and stepping on were the ones who actually understood what mattered. The room was quiet. Miguel Santos broke the silence. That's a nice story. But stories don't pay rent. Stories don't keep families housed. What are you actually going to do? That's why I'm here, to ask you what needs to be done. Graham leaned forward. I have resources, significant resources. I'm willing to invest them in this community, but I don't want to impose solutions that don't work. I want to fund what you tell me will actually help. Yolanda and the others exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Yolanda nodded. Okay, here's what we need. First, a commitment that you won't develop any more luxury properties in this neighborhood. No condos, no upscale retail, nothing that drives up prices. Done, Graham said. Just like that? I own 4 properties in this area already. I was planning to develop them. Instead, I'll convert them to affordable housing, fixed-rate rents with priority for current neighborhood residents. Rose's eyebrows rose. That's millions of dollars in lost profit. I have enough money. What I don't have is a clear conscience. Next? Dr. Morrison spoke. The clinic needs to be run by people from this community, not just staffed by us, actually governed by us. Community board with real decision-making power, not just an advisory committee you ignore. Agreed. Draft the bylaws however you want them. I'll fund it, but you'll control it. Keisha leaned back, reassessing him. You're either serious or you're the best con artist I've ever met. I'm serious. What else? For the next 2 hours, they talked, really talked, about job training programs and childcare access and mental health services and food security, about the need for a community center where teenagers had somewhere safe to go, about transportation to medical appointments for elderly residents, about English classes for immigrants and legal aid for tenant rights. Graham filled page after page with notes, his hand cramping from writing so fast. Every issue they raised revealed 10 more underneath. The complexity was staggering, but so was the clarity of their vision. These people knew exactly what their community needed because they lived it every day. There's one more thing, Pastor Whitfield said as the meeting wound down, and this is non-negotiable. You need to be present, not just writing checks from your mansion, actually here, in the neighborhood, visible and accountable. People need to know you're not just another rich person using us to feel good about yourself. How do I prove that? Move here. Graham blinked. Excuse me? Move here. Into this neighborhood. Live in one of those affordable housing units you're creating. Send your grandkids to the local public school when you have them. Shop at our stores, eat at our restaurants, go to our churches. Be part of the community you claim to want to help. The suggestion was so radical that Graham couldn't immediately process it. Leave his mansion? Live in a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood? It would mean giving up security, privacy, the comfort he'd spent decades accumulating. It would mean actually practicing what he was preaching. I'll do it, he heard himself say. Give me 6 months to arrange things, but I'll do it. Yolanda's expression shifted from skepticism to something that might have been respect. You understand what you're agreeing to? This isn't a PR stunt. You can't just move in for a few months and leave when it gets uncomfortable. I understand, and you're right. If I'm going to claim I care about this community, I need to be part of it, really part of it, not just a donor writing checks from a distance. Miguel Santos pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm putting this on record. Today's date, your commitment, all of it. So when you inevitably change your mind, we have proof of what you promised. Good, Graham said. Hold me to it, all of you. If I start to backslide, call me on it publicly. I meant what I said. I need people to keep me honest. The meeting ended with handshakes that felt more like the beginning of partnerships than the end of a negotiation. As Graham left the church basement, Yolanda walked him to his car. I'm still not sure about you, she admitted. Rich people have promised us things before. They never follow through once the cameras are gone. I know, I've probably been one of those people, but I'm trying to be different now. Why? And don't give me the story about the kid again. There's something else, something deeper. Graham considered how honest to be, then decided she deserved the truth. My daughter told me something a few weeks ago. She said she was proud of what I was building, but ashamed of what I'd built before. And I realized my own child saw me as someone who'd made the world worse. I have maybe 20 good years left if I'm lucky. I want them to count for something other than adding more zeros to a bank account. Yolanda studied his face, looking for deception. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. Okay, we'll work with you. But the second you start treating us like props in your redemption story instead of real people with real needs, we're done. Clear? Crystal clear. Thank you for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. You definitely don't deserve it. But that kid of yours, Jalen, he deserves adults who keep their promises. So we're doing this for him as much as for the community. Graham drove back to his office with his mind racing, moving to the neighborhood, converting his properties to affordable housing, ceding control of the clinic to a community board. Each decision represented a fundamental shift in how he operated, a rejection of everything he'd built his success on. Marcus was going to have a stroke. Sure enough, when Graham explained the commitments he'd made, his attorney's face went through several shades of red before settling on a kind of resigned purple. You're giving away control of a $15 million facility to people you met once in a church basement, Marcus said slowly, as if speaking to a child. And you're moving out of a 12,000 square foot mansion into affordable housing in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. That's correct. And you're converting 4 prime development properties worth at least $40 million into below-market housing. Also correct. Graham, I say this with all due respect and affection. Have you lost your mind? Possibly, or maybe I'm finally finding it. Graham pulled up the photos he'd taken during the meeting, showing Marcus the faces of the community leaders. These people have been doing the work I should have been doing for decades. They know what this neighborhood needs better than any consultant I could hire. Why wouldn't I listen to them? Because in business, you don't give away leverage. You don't surrender control. You don't... Marcus stopped, seeing Graham's expression. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Draw up whatever papers need to be drawn up. I want the community board legally enshrined as the governing body of the clinic. I want the housing conversion started by end of month, and I want my house listed for sale. Your house. The house you custom built 15 years ago. It's too big for one person. The money from the sale can fund more community programs. Marcus sat down heavily. What would Angela Brooks say if she could see this? The question caught Graham off guard. He thought about it seriously. I think she'd say it's about time someone with resources actually used them to help, instead of just accumulate more. And then she'd probably tell me I still have a long way to go. She'd be right about that last part. Marcus pulled out his tablet and started making notes. Okay, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. I'll set up the legal frameworks, but Graham, this is going to get messy. Community governance means dealing with disagreements, power struggles, people who have conflicting visions. You can't just make executive decisions anymore. Good. Maybe I've made too many executive decisions. Maybe it's time I learned to work with people instead of just directing them. That evening, Graham had his weekly video call with Jalen. The boy appeared on screen in the bedroom Dr. Porter had set up for him, surrounded by books and science equipment, and the comfortable clutter of a child who finally had space to spread out. How was your week? Graham asked. Jalen's face lit up. We dissected frogs in biology. Well, the older kids did. I got to watch. Mrs. Chen said maybe next year I can take the advanced class, even though I'm only in 4th grade. And Marcus, my friend Marcus, we're working on a science fair project together about water filtration systems. That sounds fascinating. What made you choose that topic? Jalen's expression became more serious. I was thinking about people who don't have clean water. Like, there are places where kids get sick just from drinking what comes out of the tap, and I thought maybe we could design something cheap that would help. Marcus's dad is an engineer, so he's been giving us ideas. Graham felt his chest tighten with pride that he had no right to feel. This child who'd been focused on pure survival 3 months ago was now thinking about how to help others. That's a wonderful project. Let me know if you need any supplies or resources. Dr. Porter already got us stuff. She's really good at that. Jalen paused. Can I ask you something? Always. My teacher mentioned the protests about your clinic, the people who think you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Does that bother you? Graham considered sugarcoating his answer, then remembered that Jalen deserved honesty. Yes, it bothers me, but they're not entirely wrong. I did spend most of my life making money in ways that hurt people. Building the clinic doesn't erase that. It's just a step toward being better. But you're trying. That matters, doesn't it? I hope so. I met with some of those protesters today, actually. They're going to help make sure the clinic actually serves the community instead of just making me feel good about myself. Jalen nodded thoughtfully. My mom used to say that making mistakes is okay as long as you learn from them and try to fix them. She said the problem is people who make the same mistakes over and over and never change. Your mother was very wise. Yeah, Jalen's voice got quieter. I miss her. Sometimes I forget for a while when I'm busy with school or hanging out with Marcus. Then I remember and it feels bad, like I'm betraying her by being happy. Graham's throat tightened. She wouldn't want you to feel guilty for being happy. She'd want you to live fully, to learn everything you can, to become the person she knew you could be. Being happy isn't betraying her. It's honoring her. You think so? I know so. And Jalen? I think she'd be incredibly proud of you, not just for the genius part, but for staying kind even when the world was cruel, for helping a stranger who didn't deserve your help, for still caring about your dad even after he left. Those are the things that make you extraordinary. Jalen wiped his eyes quickly. Thanks, Graham. That helps. They talked for another 20 minutes about school and friends and the science fair before saying goodbye. After the call ended, Graham sat in his study looking at the legal pads full of notes from the community meeting. Each item represented a commitment, a promise to do better. The enormity of what he'd undertaken was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about writing checks. It was about fundamentally restructuring his life, his priorities, his understanding of what mattered. It would be uncomfortable, probably often frustrating, definitely humbling. But when he thought about Jalen's question, does it bother you that people are skeptical? He realized the answer was more complicated than yes or no. It bothered him that he'd lived in a way that made skepticism justified. It bothered him that his first instinct for decades had been profit over people. It bothered him that it had taken a desperate 9-year-old to make him see what should have been obvious all along. But being bothered was good. Discomfort meant growth, and growth was what he needed if he was going to become someone worth the second chance he'd been given. His phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. Saw your meeting with the community leaders made the news. Not sure how I feel about you moving to 7th Avenue, but I'm proud of you, Dad. He smiled and typed back. Want to help me pick out an apartment? Her response came immediately. Absolutely, but we're getting you security. I'm progressive, not stupid. Deal. Graham looked around his study at the expensive artwork and the custom furniture and all the trappings of wealth he'd thought defined success. Soon this would all be someone else's, someone who probably deserved it more because they wouldn't take it for granted. He thought about Angela Brooks, who'd never had the chance to see her son in a science lab, or planning water filtration systems, or making friends who challenged him to be better. She'd died waiting for help that should have been available, would have been available if people like Graham had cared enough to provide it. The clinic wouldn't bring her back. Nothing would. But maybe it could prevent other mothers from dying unnecessarily, other children from losing parents to a system that valued money over lives. Maybe that was the best kind of memorial. Not a statue or a plaque, but a living promise that her death would mean something, that the system that failed her would be changed by her son's courage and a billionaire's belated awakening. Graham pulled out a fresh legal pad and started writing, not business plans this time. A letter to Angela Brooks, a woman he'd never met, but whose absence shaped everything he was trying to build. Dear Angela, he wrote, I'm sorry I never got to meet you. I'm sorry people like me didn't care enough to build the systems that could have saved you. I'm sorry your son had to survive alone and teach himself medicine from garbage because we failed you both so completely. But I want you to know that Jalen is safe now. He's thriving, and I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure other families don't face what yours did. It won't fix what happened, but maybe it will honor who you were and what you taught your son about kindness and courage and helping people even when they don't deserve it. Thank you for raising someone extraordinary. I promise not to waste the gift he gave me. He folded the letter and put it in his desk drawer, a private promise to a dead woman who would never read it, but whose legacy was changing everything anyway. Outside his window, the city stretched out in all its complicated glory. Somewhere out there, families were struggling, people were sick without access to care, Children were going hungry. The problems were vast and interconnected, and would take more than one clinic or one reformed billionaire to solve. But he could start. He could use what he had to make things even a little bit better. And maybe if enough people with resources actually tried, actually listened to communities instead of imposing solutions, actually cared about people instead of just profit, maybe things could change. It was a small hope, but it was real. And for the first time in 50 years, Graham felt like his life might actually matter for something beyond his bank balance. He picked up his phone and called the real estate agent. "I need you to list my house, and then help me find an apartment on 7th Avenue. Nothing fancy, just something that would work for someone who wants to be part of a community instead of above it." The agent sputtered, asked if he was sure, tried to talk him out of it. Graham let her talk, then repeated his request. Eventually, she agreed. By midnight, the wheels were in motion. The house would be listed by end of week. The apartment search would start Monday. The affordable housing conversions would begin as soon as permits cleared. The community board for the clinic would have its first meeting in 2 weeks. Everything was changing. Everything he'd built his identity around was being dismantled and rebuilt into something that might actually help instead of just accumulating. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was about time. Graham turned off the lights in his study and headed to bed, his mind already spinning with plans for tomorrow. There was so much to do, so much to fix, so much to build that actually mattered. And somewhere across the city, a 9-year-old boy with a photographic memory slept safely in a real bed, dreaming of water filters and science fairs and a future that looked nothing like his past. That alone made everything worth it. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning in late April, 6 months almost to the day since Graham had made his promise to the community leaders. The mansion that had been his home for 15 years was now empty except for echoes, its rooms stripped of the expensive furniture and artwork that would be auctioned off to fund more community programs. Graham stood in the foyer one last time, looking at the sweeping staircase and the crystal chandelier that had cost more than most people made in a year, and felt nothing but relief. His new apartment was a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of one of the buildings he'd converted to affordable housing. 900 square feet compared to the mansion's 12,000. No marble countertops or imported tile. Just clean, functional space that would be home to a man trying to figure out who he was when wealth didn't define him. Vanessa had insisted on coming to help him move in, though Graham suspected she really wanted to make sure he was actually going through with it. She stood in the small living room now, directing the movers with the same efficiency she brought to board meetings. "The couch goes against that wall." "No, the other wall. We need to leave room for the desk by the window." She turned to Graham. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." "I'm sure." Graham looked out the window at 7th Avenue below, already busy with morning traffic. A woman pushed a stroller past the corner store. 2 teenagers waited at the bus stop, backpacks slung over their shoulders. An elderly man swept the sidewalk in front of his shop. Real life, not the carefully curated distance he'd maintained for decades. "It's just such a change," Vanessa said quietly. "I'm proud of you, but I'm also worried. This neighborhood isn't always safe. There's crime, there's people," Graham interrupted gently. "People who've been living here their whole lives, making it work, building community. I'll be fine, sweetheart, and if I'm not, well, that's something I need to learn about too." The movers finished within an hour. There wasn't much to move once Graham had pared down to essentials. He'd kept his favorite chair, a simple desk, his bed, and enough dishes for one person. Everything else had been sold or donated. The apartment still looked sparse, but Graham found he liked it that way. Room to breathe, space to think without constant reminders of wealth he no longer wanted to flaunt. After Vanessa left, reluctantly, with promises to call him every day, Graham walked to the corner store he'd seen from his window. A bell chimed as he entered, and the woman behind the counter looked up from her newspaper. "Help you find something?" She was perhaps 60, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, and eyes that had seen everything. "Just exploring the neighborhood," Graham said. "I just moved in, 3rd floor, building across the street." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "You're the billionaire, the one who's building the clinic." "I'm Graham Carrington, yes, but I'm trying to be just another resident now." She studied him for a long moment, then extended her hand. "Carmen Rodriguez." I've run this store for 32 years. My husband and I bought it when this neighborhood was even rougher than it is now. Graham shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that spoke of decades of hard work. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Rodriguez. Carmen, please. Mrs. Rodriguez was my mother-in-law, and she was mean as a snake. Carmen gestured around the small store, its shelves packed with everything from canned goods to school supplies. So you're really moving here, not just some publicity stunt? Really moving here. Permanently. Huh. Carmen went back to her newspaper but kept talking. Yolanda Martinez told me about your promises. Converting buildings to affordable housing, giving control of the clinic to the community. I told her I'd believe it when I saw it. Rich people always have an angle. I understand the skepticism. I've earned it. Yes, you have. She looked up again, her expression sharp but not unkind. You developed the Morrison building 5 years ago, turned it into luxury condos. 30 families got displaced, including my sister. She'd lived there for 20 years, had to move 2 hours away to find something she could afford. Barely sees her grandkids now. Graham felt the words like a physical blow. He remembered the Morrison building project. It had been profitable. He'd been proud of it. He'd never once thought about the people who'd lost their homes. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That's not enough, I know, but I'm genuinely sorry. Carmen watched him carefully. Sorry doesn't bring my sister back to her community. But I suppose it's a start. She folded her newspaper. You want to really make a difference here? Shop local. Eat at our restaurants. Go to Pastor Whitfield's church. Show up when there's a community meeting. Be a neighbor, not a savior. I can do that. We'll see. But her expression had softened slightly. You need anything, you come here first before you go to some fancy supermarket. I may not have organic kale or whatever rich people eat, but I've got what people actually need. Graham smiled despite himself. I'll remember that. Thank you, Carmen. As he left the store, he heard her call after him. And Graham, welcome to the neighborhood. Try not to screw it up. The Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic opened on a Saturday in May, exactly 6 months after construction began. The morning was perfect, clear blue sky, temperature in the mid-70s, the kind of day that felt like a blessing. The former grocery store had been transformed into a state-of-the-art medical facility with exam rooms, a small lab, a pharmacy, and offices for social workers and mental health counselors. But it was the waiting room that Graham was most proud of. Warm lighting, comfortable chairs, a play area for children, and art on the walls created by local students. Dr. Porter stood at the entrance with the community board, greeting the stream of people who'd come for the grand opening. Free health screenings, no appointments necessary, services available in English and Spanish. The line stretched around the block. Graham had positioned himself at the back, helping Maria Gonzalez organize intake forms. He was deliberately staying out of the spotlight. This was the community's day, not his. Jalen had come with Dr. Porter, wearing a polo shirt and khakis, and looking every inch the bright student he'd become. He'd grown in the past 6 months, his face losing some of its childhood roundness, his confidence building with each passing week. When he spotted Graham, his face lit up. This is amazing, Jalen said, looking around the bustling clinic. All these people getting help. Because of my mom. Because of you, Graham corrected. You're the one who showed us what was possible. I just pressed on your leg. You did a lot more than that. Graham gestured to the sign above the entrance. Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic, with a photo of Angela that her sister had provided. She'd been beautiful, with Jalen's same intense eyes and a smile that suggested kindness. Your mother would be proud of what her name means now. Jalen's eyes were wet, but he was smiling. Yeah, she would. Dr. Morrison appeared, looking overwhelmed in the best way. The elderly doctor who'd been running a volunteer clinic from his garage now had a proper facility, a full staff, and resources he'd only dreamed of. Graham, we're going to need more exam rooms, he said, not bothering with preliminaries. The demand is already twice what we projected. I've got families who haven't seen a doctor in years, kids who need vaccinations, elderly patients with chronic conditions that have gone untreated. This is incredible, but we're going to be swamped. Then we'll expand, Graham said simply. There's space in the back we didn't develop yet. We can add 4 more exam rooms within 3 months. The budget, Is fine. This is exactly what the money is for. Graham watched an elderly woman being helped to a chair by one of the nurses, relief evident on her face. We built this to meet the need, whatever that need is. If we're overwhelmed, that just means we're actually reaching people. The first patient called back for examination was a young mother with a toddler who had a persistent cough. Graham watched Dr. Kim greet them with warmth and patience, saw the mother's shoulders relax when she was told there would be no charge, saw the little girl smile when Dr. Kim showed her the stethoscope. This was what Angela had needed. This basic kindness, this accessibility, this sense that her life mattered enough for someone to care. By noon, they'd seen 60 patients. By evening, over 200. The staff was exhausted but energized, running on adrenaline and purpose. The community board held an impromptu meeting in one of the offices, already planning adjustments and improvements based on the day's observations. Yolanda Martinez found Graham as he was helping clean up the waiting room. "Not bad for a reformed billionaire," she said. "High praise coming from you." "Don't let it go to your head. You've still got a long way to go." But she was smiling. "Seriously, though, this is good. Really good. People are already talking about it, spreading the word. We're going to have lines like this every day for months. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for them. We." I like that you said we. Yolanda picked up a stack of children's books from the play area, straightening them. "I've been watching you today. You could have been out front taking credit, doing interviews, making this about you. Instead, you've been organizing paperwork and cleaning up. Why?" Graham considered his answer carefully. "Because this isn't about me. It never was. I just provided resources. You and Dr. Porter and everyone else, you're the ones who made this real. I'm just trying to stay out of the way and help where I can." "See, that's what I don't get about you." Yolanda sat down in one of the waiting room chairs, gesturing for Graham to do the same. 6 months ago, you were ready to have a kid arrested for embarrassing you. Now you're cleaning waiting rooms and converting your properties to affordable housing. People don't change that completely that fast. Maybe they do if they get the right wake-up call. Or maybe you're playing a long game I haven't figured out yet. Graham met her eyes directly. "I'm not smart enough for a long game. I'm just trying to be better than I was. Some days I succeed, some days I fail. But I keep trying because the alternative is going back to being someone my daughter was ashamed of." Yolanda studied him for a long moment. "You know what? I think I'm starting to believe you, which either means you're genuine or you're the best con artist in history. Time will tell which. Yes, it will. And I'll be watching." She stood, stretched. "Come to the community meeting Thursday night. Pastor Whitfield's church, 7 o'clock. We're discussing the housing situation, rent control, tenant rights. Since you're a landlord now, you should hear what your tenants need. I'll be there." "Good. And Graham, wear normal clothes. You show up in a $3,000 suit, people will think you're performing." Graham looked down at his khakis and button-down shirt bought off the rack at a department store. "How's this?" Yolanda's smile was genuine. "That'll work." Thursday night found Graham in the basement of Pastor Whitfield's church, sitting in a metal folding chair between Carmen Rodriguez and a young man named Devin, who worked 2 jobs and was still barely making rent. The room was packed with residents from the neighborhood, all of them there to discuss the crisis of rising housing costs. Pastor Whitfield opened the meeting with a prayer, then turned the floor over to Yolanda. She had charts and data showing how rents in the neighborhood had increased 40% over the past 5 years while wages had remained flat. Families were being priced out, forced to move farther from jobs and schools and community. "We're losing our neighborhood," an older man said, his voice shaking with anger. "I've lived here 50 years, raised my kids here. Now my grandkids can't afford to stay. They're moving to cheaper areas, breaking up the family. It's not right." A young woman spoke up. "I'm a teacher. I work with kids in this neighborhood, but I can't afford to live here anymore. I commute an hour each way because that's the only place I could find rent I could handle. How am I supposed to serve this community when I can't be part of it?" Story after story, each one a variation on the same theme, good people being pushed out by forces beyond their control. Graham listened, taking notes, feeling the weight of his complicity. He'd been one of those forces. For decades, he'd driven up property values and rents. never thinking about who it hurt. When there was a pause, he raised his hand. Yolanda nodded at him. "I own 4 buildings in this neighborhood now," Graham said, standing so people could see him. "They're all being converted to affordable housing with fixed-rate rents, but that's just 160 units. It's not enough to solve the problem." He took a breath. "So I'm making another commitment. I'm going to buy more buildings, as many as I can, and convert them the same way. And I'm going to work with other developers and the city to create incentives for affordable housing throughout the area." "That's a lot of money," Devin said skeptically. "What do you get out of it?" "Honestly, the knowledge that I'm finally using my resources to help instead of hurt. That's it. No profit motive, no tax write-off scheme. Just trying to make up for decades of doing the opposite." Miguel Santos, the social worker from the community board, stood up. "I've been tracking Graham's activities since the clinic opened. He's done everything he promised. The housing conversions are real. The rents are actually affordable, 30% of income, which is the standard for truly affordable housing. He's not playing games." "Yet," someone called out. "What happens when he gets bored of playing philanthropist?" "That's a fair question," Graham acknowledged, "which is why I'm setting up legal structures that last beyond me. The affordable housing will be managed by a community land trust that you control. If I die tomorrow, the rents stay fixed. The buildings stay affordable. I'm removing my ability to change my mind." Pastor Whitfield spoke from the back of the room. "I've known a lot of wealthy people in my time. Most of them want credit for their charity. They want buildings named after them, plaques, recognition. But Graham's been living in this neighborhood for 3 weeks now, and most of you probably didn't even know it. He shops at Carmen's store. He eats at Rosa's restaurant. He shows up to community meetings and sits in the back. That says something." "It says he's smart enough to know how to play us," someone muttered. "Or it says he's actually trying to be a neighbor," Carmen countered. "I didn't trust him either at first, but I've watched him. He's not performing, he's present." The debate continued for another hour. Some people remained skeptical, others were cautiously optimistic. A few were actively supportive. Graham didn't try to defend himself beyond answering direct questions. He just listened, learning the contours of needs and fears he'd been insulated from his entire life. After the meeting, Devin approached him in the parking lot. "I didn't say this inside because I didn't want to look soft, but thank you. My rent was going up again next month. I was going to have to move, leave my job, pull my kid out of school. Then I heard about your affordable housing units and applied. Found out yesterday I got accepted. You literally saved my family." Graham felt his throat tighten. "I'm glad. That's what it's for." "Yeah, but you don't understand. My son, he's like that Jalen kid. Not a genius or anything, but smart. Loves school, has friends, doing well. If we'd had to move, that would have been destroyed. You kept that from happening." Devin's voice cracked. "So yeah, thank you." After Devin left, Graham sat in his car for a long time, processing the conversation. For 50 years, his business decisions had been abstract. Profit and loss, risk and reward, success measured in dollars. He'd never met the people affected by his choices, never seen how a rent increase or a development project rippled through real lives. Now he was meeting them, hearing their stories, understanding that every decision had a human cost. It was humbling. It was necessary. It was the education he should have gotten decades ago. The following week brought unexpected complications. Graham's former business partner, Richard Calloway, showed up at the clinic unannounced. He was a man Graham had known for 25 years, a fellow developer who'd built his own empire on the same principles of profit-first development. "This is quite a spectacle," Richard said, looking around the crowded waiting room with barely concealed disdain. "Graham Carrington, patron saint of the poor." "Richard, what brings you here?" "Concern for an old friend who seems to have lost his mind." Richard lowered his voice. "We need to talk, privately." They stepped outside into the spring sunshine. Richard pulled out a cigarette, lit it despite the no smoking sign, and got straight to the point. "You're destroying shareholder value in our joint ventures. The affordable housing conversions, the clinic, this whole poverty tourism routine you're running, it's affecting our partnerships. I've got investors asking questions." "Then answer them," Graham said evenly. "Tell them I'm reallocating my priorities." "Your priorities are making us both look bad. You know how many developers are watching this? They think you've gone soft, that you're betraying the industry. The industry will survive without me. Richard took a long drag on his cigarette. I'm offering you an out. Sell me your shares in our joint projects, fair market value. You can take your money and play savior, and I'll run the businesses like actual businesses. Those projects include 3 developments that would displace low-income residents. Exactly. We clear them out, build luxury units, make a fortune. That was always the plan. Graham looked at his former partner and saw himself 6 months ago. The same ruthlessness, the same inability to see people as anything but obstacles or opportunities. The same emptiness disguised as success. I'm not selling, Graham said, and I'm voting against those developments. We're converting them to affordable housing instead. Richard's face flushed red. You can't do that. We have contracts, agreements, which include provisions for partners to object on ethical grounds. I'm exercising that right. Those families aren't going to be displaced so we can make more money we don't need. This is insane. You're throwing away millions of dollars. I'm investing them in something that matters. Graham met Richard's furious gaze calmly. You can fight me on this if you want. Take it to court. But you'll lose, and you'll look like the villain. Or you can work with me to find solutions that don't destroy communities. Work with you? Richard's laugh was bitter. You've become everything we used to mock. The bleeding hearts, the social justice warriors, the people who think feelings matter more than facts. The fact is that our success came at the cost of other people's suffering. I'm just trying to balance the equation. You're trying to assuage guilt that you shouldn't even feel. We played by the rules, we won. That's how the world works. Maybe the world doesn't have to work that way. Graham gestured to the clinic behind them. These people aren't statistics or obstacles. They're human beings with the same right to dignity and stability that we take for granted. If recognizing that makes me soft, so be it. Richard dropped his cigarette and ground it out with his heel. You're going to regret this. When the novelty wears off and you realize you've wasted your leverage for nothing, you're going to regret it. I already regret a lot of things, Richard, but this won't be one of them. After Richard left, Graham stood outside the clinic for a long time, watching the stream of people coming and going. A mother with 3 children, an elderly couple holding hands, a young man who looked like he'd been sleeping rough. All of them getting care they needed, care they couldn't have afforded otherwise. This was real. This mattered. No amount of money from luxury developments could buy the feeling he got from knowing that his resources were actually helping people instead of just making him richer. His phone buzzed with a text from Jalen. Science fair is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Can you come? I know you're busy, but it would mean a lot. Graham smiled and typed back immediately. Wouldn't miss it for anything. The science fair was held in Westfield Academy's gymnasium, transformed into a showcase of student projects. Graham arrived to find Jalen and Marcus standing proudly beside their water filtration display, complete with working prototypes and detailed charts explaining their methodology. This is impressive, Graham said, examining their work. They designed a simple, cheap filtration system using sand, charcoal, and gravel that could be built from materials available almost anywhere. Have you tested it? Extensively, Marcus said, his enthusiasm matching Jalen's. We contaminated water with bacteria and particulates, then ran it through our system. The filtered water tested clean. It's not perfect, but it's like 90% effective and costs less than $10 to build. We're thinking it could help people in places without clean water infrastructure, Jalen added, like communities after natural disasters or developing countries or even homeless encampments where people don't have access to safe drinking water. Graham felt pride swell in his chest. You're not just doing a science project. You're actually trying to solve a real problem. Like you taught us, Jalen said simply. You showed me that having resources or knowledge doesn't mean anything if you don't use them to help people. The boys won second place, which they celebrated with ice cream from the cafeteria. As they sat together, Marcus's father joined them, an engineer named David Chen, who'd been instrumental in helping the boys refine their design. Your son has an extraordinary mind, David said to Dr. Porter, who'd arrived to watch the judging. The way he processes information, makes connections. I've never seen anything like it in someone so young. He's special, Dr. Porter agreed, ruffling Jalen's hair affectionately. We're just trying to give him the support to flourish. Well, it's working, David turned to Graham, And I hear you're the one funding the scholarship that made this possible. That's generous. It's necessary, Graham corrected. Genius like Jalen's shouldn't be wasted because of circumstances of birth. Every kid deserves the chance to reach their potential. I agree, which is why I wanted to talk to you. David pulled out a business card. I run an engineering firm. We do a lot of work in sustainable development infrastructure for underserved communities. I've been following what you're doing with the clinic and the affordable housing. If you ever want to talk about expanding that work, water systems, renewable energy, that kind of thing, I'd be interested in partnering. Graham took the card, intrigued. What did you have in mind? The neighborhoods you're serving, a lot of them have aging infrastructure, lead pipes, inadequate electricity, poor insulation that drives up heating costs. We could systematically upgrade these systems, make them sustainable and safe. It's a massive undertaking, but with your resources and our expertise, it's doable. That would be incredibly expensive. Sure, but you're already spending millions on the clinic and housing. Why stop there? Why not create a comprehensive approach to community development, health, housing, infrastructure, all of it integrated? The idea took root in Graham's mind immediately. David was right. Treating symptoms without addressing root causes would only go so far. If he wanted to really make a difference, he needed to think bigger. Let's meet next week, Graham said. Bring your team. I'll bring mine. Let's see what's possible. As the science fair wound down and families headed home, Graham walked with Jalen and Dr. Porter to the parking lot. The evening was perfect, the sky turning pink and gold as the sun set. You look happy, Jalen observed. Like, really happy, not just pretend happy. Graham laughed. I am happy. Watching you and Marcus present your project, talking to David about infrastructure improvements, being part of something that matters. Yes, I'm happy. Good. You deserve to be happy. So do you, kiddo. And you are, right? School's going well, you have friends, you feel safe. Yeah, sometimes I still have nightmares about being on the streets, and I miss my mom every day. But mostly, yeah, I'm happy. Jalen paused. My dad wrote to me. Did Dr. Porter tell you? She mentioned it. How do you feel about that? Confused. He's in a program, getting help like you promised. Says he's doing better, wants to see me when he's ready. Part of me wants that too. But part of me is still angry that he left. Both those feelings are valid, Graham said. You can want a relationship with your father and also be angry about what he did. Those things don't cancel each other out. That's what my therapist says too. Jalen kicked at a pebble. It's complicated. Most important things are. Graham squeezed the boy's shoulder. Whatever you decide about your dad, know that you have people who care about you. Dr. Porter, me, your teachers, your friends. You're not alone in figuring this out. I know. That helps. After saying goodbye to Jalen and Dr. Porter, Graham drove through the neighborhood he now called home. Past Carmen's store, past the clinic, past the buildings he'd converted to affordable housing. The evening was alive with activity. Kids playing basketball in the park, families walking together, neighbors chatting on stoops. This was community. This was what he'd been missing his whole life while sitting alone in his mansion, counting his money and calling it success. His phone rang. Marcus, his attorney. I've got news, Marcus said. Richard's filing suit. Claims you're violating your fiduciary duty to the partnership by blocking the luxury developments. He's asking for a court order forcing you to either approve the projects or sell your shares. Graham had expected this. What are our chances? Honestly, mixed. He's got a case that you're putting personal ethics above partnership profits. But we can argue that the ethical clause in your agreement covers exactly this situation. It'll be expensive and time-consuming either way. Then let's fight it. I'm not displacing families, so Richard can add another 0 to his net worth. I figured you'd say that. I'm already preparing our response. Marcus paused. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Not the profitable thing, but the right thing. High praise from my lawyer. Yeah, well, don't let it go to your head. I'm still billing you for all of this. Graham laughed and hung up, feeling lighter despite the impending legal battle. He'd been in fights before. This one just mattered more than any of the others. He parked in front of his apartment building and sat for a moment, looking up at the modest structure that was now home. The lights in various apartments glowed warm against the gathering darkness. Behind those windows were the people he'd spent his whole life ignoring, teachers and nurses and store clerks and social workers, all of them working hard and building lives that mattered. He was one of them now. Not because he'd suddenly become poor, but because he'd finally learned that wealth was meaningless without connection, that success measured in dollars was just accumulation, that the only thing that actually mattered was whether you left the world better than you found it. Graham got out of the car and walked into his building, nodding to neighbors he was starting to recognize. Tomorrow, he'd fight Richard in court. He'd meet with David about infrastructure projects. He'd continue the slow, difficult work of becoming someone worth the second chance he'd been given. But tonight, he'd make dinner in his small kitchen, maybe call Vanessa, definitely think about Jalen's water filtration project, and what it said about the power of giving young people resources and believing in their potential. Tonight, for the first time in 50 years, Graham Carrington felt like his life might actually mean something beyond the empire he'd built. And that was worth more than all the mansions and luxury developments in the world. The courtroom was surprisingly small for a case that would determine the future of 3 major development projects and the homes of over 400 families. Graham sat beside Marcus at the defendant's table, watching Richard's legal team set up their presentation with the kind of precision that money could buy. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Morales, looked over her reading glasses at both parties with the weary patience of someone who'd seen too many rich men fighting over money. "This is a civil matter concerning partnership agreements and fiduciary duty," Judge Morales began. "Mr. Calloway claims that Mr. Carrington is violating his obligations to their joint ventures by blocking profitable developments on ethical grounds. Mr. Carrington argues that the partnership agreement explicitly allows for ethical objections. I've reviewed the contracts. Now I want to hear from the people actually affected by this decision." Richard's attorney, a sharp-faced man named Preston Wells, stood immediately. "Your Honor, the contracts are clear. This is a business dispute, not a referendum on social policy. The affected parties are the investors who stand to lose millions if—" "I didn't ask about investors," Judge Morales interrupted. "I asked about the people affected by the developments themselves, the residents of the communities in question. Are any of them here?" Graham felt his heart rate increase. He and Marcus had anticipated arguments about contract law and business practices. They hadn't expected the judge to care about the actual human impact. "Your Honor," Marcus said, standing carefully, "we have several residents present who can speak to how these developments would affect their lives." Yolanda Martinez was the first to approach the witness stand. She wore a simple dress and carried herself with the same no-nonsense dignity Graham had come to respect. After being sworn in, she looked directly at the judge. "I'm a community organizer. I've lived in the 7th Avenue neighborhood for 43 years. I raised my children there. I've watched it change, watched families pushed out by rising rents and luxury developments. The 3 properties Mr. Calloway wants to develop currently house low-income families. If they're torn down for condos, those families have nowhere to go." Preston Wells stood. "Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that those buildings are old and poorly maintained? That new development would actually improve the neighborhood?" "Improve it for who?" Yolanda shot back. "For the wealthy people who'll move into $1,000 a square foot condos? Sure. But the families living there now, the ones who've built community and supported local businesses and sent their kids to neighborhood schools, they'll be scattered to cheaper areas far from their jobs and support systems. That's not improvement. That's displacement. But surely progress requires some change. Progress that destroys community isn't progress. It's just profitable destruction dressed up in nice language." The judge made notes, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Next witness." Carmen Rodriguez testified about how her sister had been displaced by one of Graham's previous developments, how it had torn apart her family. Devin talked about how Graham's affordable housing units had saved him from having to move his son away from a good school. Dr. Porter explained how the clinic was already serving thousands of patients who'd had nowhere else to turn, and how the integrated approach to community development was proving more effective than isolated interventions. Then Richard took the stand, and the tone shifted dramatically. He was polished and confident, arguing that business decisions couldn't be held hostage to sentiment. "I understand that change is difficult," Richard said smoothly, "but these properties are underutilized. We could create hundreds of construction jobs, generate tax revenue for the city, and improve property values throughout the area. Mr. Carrington's refusal to move forward is costing jobs and economic growth." "And costing people their homes," Judge Morales observed. "Those people can find other housing. The city has programs, resources. Do you know where the nearest available affordable housing is from these sites?" the judge asked. Richard hesitated. "I'm not familiar with the specific details." "It's 45 minutes by bus," Judge Morales said, consulting her notes. "In an area with higher crime rates and worse schools. So when you say people can find other housing, what you mean is they can be pushed somewhere you don't have to see them." The courtroom went very quiet. Richard's attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, with respect, the social implications aren't relevant to the legal question of whether Mr. Carrington violated his partnership obligations. On the contrary, Mr. Wells, they're entirely relevant. The partnership agreement includes an ethical objection clause. To determine if Mr. Carrington's objections are valid, I need to understand the ethical stakes." Judge Morales turned back to Richard. "Tell me, Mr. Calloway, have you visited these properties, met the families who live there, considered any alternatives that might preserve both community and economic development?" "That's not my job. I'm a developer, not a social worker." "No, you're a businessman who sees people as obstacles to profit, while Mr. Carrington seems to have realized that people are the point." The judge closed her folder. "I'm ready to rule." Graham felt Marcus tense beside him. This was it. Judge Morales looked at both parties with the kind of expression that suggested she was about to disappoint everyone equally. The partnership agreement is clear. It allows either partner to object to projects on ethical grounds, provided those objections are made in good faith and not as a pretext for other business motives. Having heard the testimony today, I find that Mr. Carrington's objections are genuine and well-founded. The developments would cause significant harm to established communities, and there are viable alternatives that would serve both economic and social interests. Richard's face went red. "Your Honor, I'm not finished. Mr. Carrington is within his rights to block these developments. However, this creates an untenable partnership. You two clearly have fundamentally different values and approaches to business. Therefore, I'm ordering the dissolution of your joint ventures. Mr. Calloway, you'll buy out Mr. Carrington's shares at fair market value, or vice versa. You have 90 days to negotiate the terms. If you can't reach an agreement, I'll appoint an assessor to determine valuation." She banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned. And gentlemen, in the future, try to remember that the communities you develop in are made of actual human beings with lives that matter." Dismissed. Outside the courthouse, Graham was immediately surrounded by the community members who'd testified. Yolanda hugged him hard enough to crack ribs. "Did you hear her?" Yolanda was laughing and crying at the same time. She basically called him a soulless profiteer in legal language. That was beautiful. Marcus was on his phone already, working out the details of the partnership dissolution. "Richard's going to want to buy you out. The question is whether you want to sell or force him to." Graham thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. "I'll sell. Use the money to fund more community development. Richard can have the partnership. I don't want to be in business with someone who sees people as obstacles." "That's going to be a substantial amount of money. We're talking hundreds of millions once everything's valued and liquidated." "Good. We can do a lot of good with hundreds of millions." Graham looked at the crowd of people who'd shown up to support him, people he hadn't known existed 6 months ago. "I want to set up a foundation, community-directed, like the clinic, fund affordable housing developments, infrastructure improvements, educational programs, everything we've talked about, but bigger and more sustainable." Yolanda overheard and grabbed his arm. "You're serious? You're really going to put that money into the community instead of just pocketing it?" "I'm serious. You've all shown me what actually matters. Now I want to put resources behind it in a way that lasts beyond my lifetime." The news coverage that evening was extensive. The video of Judge Morales essentially dressing down Richard Calloway went viral, spawned countless think pieces about development and displacement and the responsibility of wealth. Graham's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with interview requests, which he systematically declined. This wasn't about publicity. This was about finally getting something right. 2 months later, Graham stood in Pastor Whitfield's church for a very different kind of gathering. The community had organized a celebration for the clinic's first anniversary, and the basement was packed with people whose lives had been touched by the work they'd built together. Jalen was there with Dr. Porter, both of them beaming. The boy had grown again, nearly as tall as Graham's shoulder now, his voice starting to crack with the beginnings of adolescence. He just finished 5th grade at the top of his class and had been accepted into an advanced summer program at the University for Gifted Students in Science. "I can't believe it's been a year," Jalen said, looking around at the crowd. "Since that night at the restaurant, since everything changed." "Changed for all of us," Graham agreed. "You changed all of us. I just pressed on your leg. You did a lot more than that, and you know it." Graham smiled. "But speaking of your leg-pressing skills, I have something to show you." He pulled out his phone and showed Jalen a video. It was Dennis Brooks, Jalen's father, standing in front of a small apartment that looked clean and organized. Dennis looked different, healthier, clear-eyed, present in a way he hadn't been that day in Dr. Porter's yard. "Hey, buddy," Dennis said in the video, his voice steady. "It's been 9 months since I last saw you. 9 months of therapy and job training and learning how to be the dad you deserve. I've got a job now, working construction, helping build affordable housing units, actually. Got my own place. Been sober for 7 months. I'm not perfect, but I'm better. And if you're willing, I'd like to see you. Just for lunch or something. No pressure. Just want you to know I'm trying. I love you, Jalen. Your mom would be so proud of who you're becoming." Jalen's eyes were wet. "When did you get this?" "Yesterday. Your dad sent it to me because he wasn't sure you'd watch it if it came directly from him. He's genuinely doing better, kiddo. The program worked. He's employed, stable, attending support groups. If you want to see him, I think he's ready. But only if you want to." "I do," Jalen said quietly. "I'm still mad at him for leaving, but I want to know him. I want him to be okay. Then we'll set something up, supervised at first just to make sure everyone's comfortable. Dr. Porter will be there, and so will I if you want." "Yeah, I want that." Dr. Porter joined them, having overheard the conversation. "We'll take it slow, build trust, see if he can maintain his progress. But Jalen, it's okay to hope for this. It's okay to want your father in your life." The evening continued with speeches and testimonials from patients the clinic had helped. A woman whose diabetes had been diagnosed and managed before she lost her vision. A child whose asthma was finally under control. An elderly man who'd been able to stay in his home because the social workers helped him access benefits he didn't know existed. Yolanda took the microphone last, and the room went quiet. She commanded attention effortlessly. "A year ago, a billionaire I didn't trust made a bunch of promises I didn't believe. He said he was going to build a clinic and convert buildings to affordable housing and actually care about this community. I thought it was performance. I thought he'd lose interest when the cameras stopped watching. I was wrong." She paused, looking directly at Graham. "Graham Carrington has done everything he promised, and more. The clinic serves over 500 patients a week. The affordable housing has kept hundreds of families in their homes. The infrastructure improvements are making our neighborhoods safer and more sustainable. The educational scholarships are sending kids to schools they never could have afforded. And through all of it, he's been present, living here, shopping here, showing up to community meetings, and actually listening." The room erupted in applause. Graham felt his face flush. "But here's the thing," Yolanda continued when the noise died down. "This isn't about one rich guy having a change of heart. This is about what becomes possible when people with resources actually listen to communities and invest in what we say we need instead of what they think we should have. Graham didn't save us. He gave us tools to save ourselves. There's a difference." More applause. Graham caught Jalen's eye across the room and saw the boy smiling with pure joy. "So tonight, we're celebrating the Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic. We're celebrating every person who walks through those doors and gets help they couldn't get anywhere else. We're celebrating the community that's staying together instead of being scattered by gentrification. And yes, we're celebrating the man who finally figured out that buildings don't matter nearly as much as the people who live in them." Yolanda raised her glass. "To Angela Brooks, who raised a son extraordinary enough to change the world. and to everyone who's working to make sure her death means something beyond tragedy, to building something that lasts. To building something that lasts, the room echoed. After the celebration wound down, Graham found himself walking through the neighborhood with Pastor Whitfield. The evening was warm, the streets alive with summer activity. Kids played basketball under streetlights. Families sat on stoops, talking and laughing. Music drifted from open windows. "This is what community looks like," Pastor Whitfield said. "Not perfect, not wealthy, but alive and connected and real." "I spent 50 years never seeing this," Graham admitted. "Never caring about it. I thought success was isolation and accumulation. I was so wrong." "But you learned. That's what matters." "Most people never learn. They die still chasing the wrong things." "Jalen taught me. A 9-year-old kid who'd lost everything showed me what actually matters." Children have a way of doing that. They see truth more clearly than adults who've learned to rationalize and justify. Pastor Whitfield stopped walking, turned to face Graham. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Are you happy now? Really happy? Not just satisfied with your good deeds?" Graham thought about the question seriously. Was he happy? His bank account was smaller than it had been. His home was a fraction of the size. His days were spent in meetings about community needs instead of profit margins. His former business partners thought he was insane. He'd given up comfort and security and the insulation wealth provided. "Yes," he said finally. "I'm happy. Happier than I've ever been, actually. Because for the first time in my life, I'm part of something bigger than myself. I'm connected to people in real ways. My life means something beyond just accumulation." "That's grace," Pastor Whitfield said. "Being given a second chance you don't deserve and using it to become who you should have been all along." "I have a long way to go still, a lot to make up for." None of us reaches perfection, but the trying matters. The daily choice to be better than you were yesterday, that's what redeems us. They walked back toward Graham's building in comfortable silence. Before they parted, Pastor Whitfield gripped Graham's shoulder. "Angela Brooks would approve of what you're building in her name. Not just the clinic, but the whole approach. Listening to communities, investing in people, creating systems that last. That's a legacy worth having." 3 weeks later, Graham sat in a supervised visitation room at a family services center, watching Jalen and Dennis try to rebuild a relationship that had shattered 9 months earlier. Dr. Porter sat beside Graham, both of them present, but giving father and son space to navigate their complicated feelings. Dennis had brought photos, pictures of Angela, of Jalen as a baby, of family moments before everything fell apart. He talked about Angela with love and grief, sharing memories that made Jalen laugh and cry. "Your mom, she knew you were special from the beginning," Dennis said, his voice thick with emotion. "You'd memorize entire books after hearing them once. She'd test you, flipping to random pages, and you'd recite them perfectly. She always said you were going to do important things." "I'm trying," Jalen said quietly. "I'm learning everything I can so I can help people the way she would have wanted." "You're already helping people. Look at what you started, the clinic, the housing, all of it. You did that. Graham did that." "No," Dennis said firmly. "Graham provided resources, but you provided the inspiration. You showed him what mattered. That's a gift, Jalen. That's your mother's gift living on through you." Graham felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. This moment, this healing happening in real time, was worth every dollar he'd spent, every business relationship he'd destroyed, every comfortable assumption he'd been forced to abandon. After the visit ended, Dennis approached Graham in the parking lot. He looked nervous, uncertain, but determined. "Thank you," Dennis said. "For the program, for the job, for not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself, and for taking care of Jalen when I couldn't. You're taking care of yourself now. That's what matters." "I have a long way to go, but I'm trying. For him, for Angela's memory." Dennis paused. "I heard about the foundation you're setting up, the community development work. If you ever need someone who understands what it's like to hit bottom and fight your way back up, I'd like to help. I'm just a construction worker, but I know this neighborhood. I know what people need." Graham extended his hand. "We could use someone like that. Someone who's lived it. Talk to Yolanda Martinez. She's heading up the Community Advisory Board. Tell her I sent you." Dennis's handshake was firm. "I will. Thank you. For everything." 6 months after the court case, the foundation was officially launched. The Angela Brooks Community Development Foundation, with a community board that included Yolanda, Dr. Porter, Pastor Whitfield, and 5 other neighborhood leaders. Graham served on the board but had only 1 vote, same as everyone else. The foundation had an endowment of $400 million from the sale of Graham's share of the partnership with Richard, enough to fund community initiatives in perpetuity if managed properly. The launch event was held at the clinic, which had expanded to include 4 additional exam rooms, a dental suite, and a vision center. Over 1,000 people showed up, filling the parking lot and spilling into the street. News crews captured the scene, not for Graham's benefit, but because the model they were building had caught national attention. Other cities were reaching out, asking how to replicate the integrated approach to community development. Jalen, now 11 and even taller, stood at the microphone with a confidence that would have been unthinkable a year ago. He'd been asked to speak about his mother and what the foundation meant to him. "My mom died because she couldn't get help when she needed it," Jalen said, his voice clear and strong. "She waited in an emergency room for 6 hours because she didn't have the right insurance or the right address or the right appearance. And by the time they finally saw her, it was too late. That's wrong. That's not okay. And it happens to people every single day in this country." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "But it doesn't have to. This clinic proves it doesn't have to. In the past year, we've seen thousands of people who needed help and couldn't afford it. We saw them anyway. We treated them anyway. Because their lives matter, regardless of what's in their bank account." Graham watched from the side of the stage, pride and grief and hope tangled together in his chest. "My mom's name is on this building," Jalen continued. "But it's not just about remembering her. It's about making sure what happened to her doesn't keep happening to other people. It's about building systems that actually work for everyone, not just the wealthy. It's about recognizing that every person deserves dignity and care and the chance to live without fear of being ignored when they need help most." The crowd was absolutely silent, hanging on every word. "So when you see my mom's name, Angela Brooks, I want you to remember that she mattered, that her life had value, that her death should mean something beyond tragedy. And I want you to know that every person who gets help here, every family that stays in their home because of affordable housing, every kid who gets to go to a good school because of scholarships, they're all part of her legacy. They're all proof that one person's life can change the world if enough people care enough to do something about it." Jalen stepped back from the microphone, and the applause was thunderous. Dr. Porter hugged him tight. Dennis, watching from the audience with tears streaming down his face, looked like a man witnessing redemption. Graham took the microphone next, but kept his remarks brief. This wasn't his day. This was the community's day, Angela's day, Jalen's day. "Everything Jalen said is true," Graham began. "Angela Brooks deserved better than what she got. So do millions of other people in this country who fall through the cracks of systems that prioritize profit over people. I can't fix everything. None of us can. But we can fix what's in front of us. We can build models that work and share them with other communities. We can prove that another way is possible." He looked at the crowd, at faces he now knew by name. Carmen from the corner store, Devin and his family, Miguel and Rosa and Dr. Morrison and all the others who taught him what actually mattered. "A year and a half ago, I was a very different person. I measured success in dollars and buildings. I saw people as obstacles or opportunities. I genuinely believed I was better than everyone else because I had more money." Graham's voice caught. "Then a barefoot 9-year-old walked into my life and saved my leg and my soul in the same night. He showed me what actual worth looks like, what real courage is, what it means to help someone even when they don't deserve it." He found Jalen in the crowd and smiled. "This foundation, this clinic, the affordable housing, all of it. It's not charity. It's not me being generous. It's me finally understanding that human beings matter more than profit margins, that community matters more than individual wealth, that we're all connected, and when any of us suffers, we all suffer. When any of us thrives, we all benefit." Graham gestured to the clinic behind him. "This building represents a promise, that every person who walks through these doors matters, that their health matters, their housing matters, their children's education matters, that we're going to build systems that actually serve people instead of extracting from them. And we're going to keep building until everyone has access to the dignity and care they deserve. The applause washed over him, but Graham barely heard it. He was watching Jalen, who was smiling that same smile from the science fair, the smile of a kid who finally believed the world might actually be good. After the speeches ended and the crowd dispersed, Graham found himself alone on the clinic's front steps with Vanessa. His daughter had become deeply involved in the foundation's work, using her business acumen to ensure financial sustainability while maintaining community control. "Mom would have liked this," Vanessa said quietly. "Not the clinic specifically, but seeing you actually happy, actually connected to life instead of just moving through it." Graham thought about his late wife, who died 5 years earlier after a long illness. They'd had a comfortable marriage, but not a particularly close one. He'd been too focused on business, too absent even when physically present, another regret to add to the long list. "I wish I'd figured this out while she was alive," Graham admitted. "Wish I'd been the husband and father I should have been." You can't change the past, but you're changing the present, and that matters. Vanessa took his hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad. Really proud. Not because of the money you're spending or the buildings you're converting, because you're finally actually here, present, connected, human. Better late than never? Much better late than never." That evening, Graham walked through the neighborhood as the sun set, taking in the changes that 18 months had wrought. The streets were cleaner, the buildings better maintained. There was a new community center where teenagers gathered after school. The affordable housing units were full, keeping families together. The clinic's lights glowed warm as evening appointments continued. But more than the physical changes, there was a shift in atmosphere. People greeted him by name now, stopped to talk about their kids or their jobs or upcoming community events. He wasn't a wealthy stranger anymore. He was Graham from the third floor, the guy who sometimes burned dinner and set off his smoke alarm, who attended every community meeting, who showed up when neighbors needed help moving furniture or organizing block parties. He'd become part of something, part of the fabric of community life, and it felt more valuable than any business deal he'd ever closed. His phone buzzed with a text from Jalen. "Can I come over tomorrow after school? Want to show you something I've been working on." Graham smiled and typed back, "Of course. I'll make sure I have good snacks this time." "LOL, your snacks are always good. See you tomorrow." The next afternoon, Jalen showed up at Graham's apartment with his backpack full of notebooks and a laptop. He'd been working on a proposal for a youth mentorship program that would connect kids from under-resourced schools with professionals in fields they were interested in. "The problem is access," Jalen explained, spreading his notes across Graham's small dining table. "There are kids as smart as me or smarter, but they don't even know what careers exist. They don't have anyone showing them what's possible. So I thought if we created a structured program, brought in doctors and engineers and scientists and artists and everything, let kids shadow them and ask questions and see real-world applications of what they're learning. It could change trajectories," Graham finished. "Open doors kids don't even know exist." Exactly! And the foundation could fund it. We could start with just our neighborhood, prove it works, then expand to other communities. Graham looked at the detailed proposal Jalen had created, complete with budget projections and partnership possibilities and anticipated outcomes. This wasn't just a kid's idea. It was a fully formed program ready to implement. "You're 11 years old," Graham said wonderingly, "and you're designing social programs that most adults couldn't conceive of." Jalen shrugged, embarrassed. "I just remember what it was like to not know things were possible. I thought all I could be was poor and homeless because that's all I'd seen. Then you and Dr. Porter and everyone else showed me different. I want other kids to have that too." "Then let's do it. Present this to the foundation board next week. I think they're going to love it." They spent the next hour refining the proposal, Jalen's enthusiasm infectious. Graham watched the boy work, so different from the desperate child who'd walked onto that terrace 18 months ago, yet fundamentally the same. Still brilliant, still kind, still focused on helping others. "Can I ask you something?" Jalen said as they were wrapping up. "Always. Do you ever regret it? Giving up your old life, the mansion and the money and all of it? Do you ever wish you could go back?" Graham considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss certain comforts, having staff to handle everything, never worrying about anything practical. But regret? No. Never. Because that life was empty, Jalen. I had everything, and it meant nothing because I wasn't connected to anything real. And now? Now I have enough. A safe place to live, meaningful work, real relationships with people who challenge me to be better. That's worth more than any mansion. Graham smiled. You gave me that. You showed me what actually matters. I should be asking if you regret it, taking a chance on a bitter old man who threatened to have you arrested. You weren't old, Jalen said, grinning. And you're not bitter anymore. You're just Graham, my friend, the guy who helped my dad get better and built a clinic for my mom and gives kids like me a chance to be something. You would have been something regardless. You're extraordinary. Maybe. But it's easier to be extraordinary when people believe in you, when you have support and resources and people who care if you succeed. Jalen started packing his notebooks. That's what I want the mentorship program to do. Give kids that foundation so their potential doesn't get wasted. After Jalen left, Graham sat in his apartment as darkness fell, thinking about potential and second chances and the ways lives intersected and changed each other. If he hadn't gone to Sterling Oaks that night, if Jalen hadn't been desperate enough to take the risk of approaching him, if he hadn't had that exact medical crisis at that exact moment, so many variables that could have gone differently, leaving him still bitter and isolated and chasing the wrong things. But it had happened, all of it. And now he was here, in a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood, genuinely happy for the first time in decades. His phone rang. Marcus, calling with updates on the foundation's legal status and the latest affordable housing acquisition. They talked for 30 minutes about zoning regulations and community input and the delicate balance of development that helped rather than harmed. Work that mattered. Work that would last beyond him. The following week, the Foundation Board unanimously approved Jalen's mentorship program with funding for a 3-year pilot. Within a month, they had over 100 professionals signed up to mentor and twice that many students eager to participate. The program launched with a ceremony at the community center, where Jalen, now named the program's youth advisor, gave another speech that left half the room in tears. Dennis was there, sitting with Dr. Porter, watching his son with unconcealed pride. He'd been sober for over a year now, had been promoted to foreman on his construction crew, and was slowly rebuilding his relationship with Jalen through weekly visits and phone calls. He'd never fully regained the lost time, but he was present now, trying. That counted for something. As summer turned to fall, Graham's new life settled into a rhythm. Morning walks to Carmen's store for coffee and conversation. Days spent in foundation meetings and community planning sessions. Evenings at the clinic, where he'd started volunteering at the front desk, checking in patients and helping with paperwork. Weekly dinners with Jalen, watching the boy grow and thrive and develop into someone who would change the world. The legal battle with Richard had been resolved with Graham selling his shares for a sum that made even Marcus whistle low. All of it went into the foundation's endowment, ensuring perpetual funding for community programs. Richard had called him an idiot. Graham had called it the best investment he'd ever made. His former mansion had been purchased by a tech entrepreneur who planned to fill it with smart home technology and imported furniture. Graham felt nothing but relief. That space had been a monument to loneliness disguised as success. Better someone else enjoy it while he built something that actually mattered. On a crisp October evening, exactly 2 years after that fateful night at Sterling Oaks, the community organized a surprise celebration in the park near Graham's apartment. The whole neighborhood turned out, hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by the clinic, the housing, the programs, the integrated approach to community development that was now being studied and replicated in cities across the country. Yolanda presented Graham with a plaque, but instead of honoring him, it honored Angela Brooks with a quote from Jalen's speech. Every person deserves dignity and care and the chance to live without fear of being ignored when they need help most. This is what you've built, Yolanda said, gesturing to the crowd. Not buildings or programs or systems, community, connection, a model for how people with resources can actually serve instead of just extracting. Angela's legacy living on through her son's courage and your willingness to change. Graham looked out at faces he knew, lives he'd come to care about deeply. Carmen and her family. Devin and his son, Dr. Porter and the clinic staff, Pastor Whitfield and the church community, Miguel and Rosa and Dr. Morrison, Dennis, sober and present, Vanessa, tears streaming down her face with pride. And at the center of it all, Jalen Brooks, now 12 years old and already planning his next project to help people. I don't deserve this, Graham said honestly. 2 years ago, I was ready to destroy Jalen for embarrassing me. I was the worst kind of person, wealthy and powerful and completely disconnected from anything that mattered. If anyone should be celebrated tonight, it's all of you who gave me a second chance I absolutely didn't deserve. But you took it, Pastor Whitfield called out. That's what matters. You could have made empty promises and walked away. Instead, you stayed. You listened. You changed. That's grace in action. The celebration continued into the evening with food and music and the kind of joy that came from genuine community. Graham found himself dancing with Carmen, who taught him salsa steps and laughed at his terrible rhythm. Later, he sat with a group of teenagers from the mentorship program, listening to their dreams of becoming doctors and engineers and teachers and artists, dreams that were now possible because someone believed in them. As the party wound down and people began heading home, Jalen pulled Graham aside to a quiet corner of the park. I have something for you, Jalen said, pulling a worn envelope from his jacket pocket. I found this in some of my mom's things. She wrote it before she died, when she was sick but still thought she'd get better. I wasn't sure if I should show you, but Dr. Porter said I should. Graham took the envelope carefully. It was addressed to whoever helps my son. Inside was a letter in neat handwriting, dated 3 weeks before Angela Brooks died. To whoever is reading this, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. It means my son Jalen is alone and scared and probably hungry. He's special. I know every mother thinks that, but Jalen truly is. He remembers everything he reads. He asks questions that make adults uncomfortable because they're too smart, too deep. He cares about people with an intensity that worries me because the world is cruel to people who care too much. But that caring is what makes him extraordinary. Please don't let the world crush that out of him. Please help him understand that his gift isn't just his memory, it's his heart. Please make sure he knows that being smart means nothing if you don't use it to help people who need it. Please let him be a child while he learns to be the man he's meant to become. And please tell him that I loved him more than anything in this world, that he was the best thing I ever did, and that I'm sorry I couldn't stay to watch him change the world. Because he will. I know he will. Thank you for helping him get there. Graham's hands were shaking. Tears blurred the words. He read the letter again, and then a third time, each word a gift and a burden, and a responsibility he was honored to carry. She knew, he whispered. Even at the end, she knew you'd be extraordinary. She always believed in me, Jalen said, his own voice thick with emotion. Even when things were really bad, she'd tell me I was going to do important things. I used to think she was just being nice, being a mom, but now I think she really saw it, saw who I could be. She did. And she was right. Graham folded the letter carefully, reverently. And Jalen, I want you to know that I consider it the greatest honor of my life to help you become who she knew you'd be. Every single day, I try to be worthy of the trust she placed in whoever would help you. I don't always succeed, but I keep trying. You succeed more than you know. Jalen hugged Graham suddenly, fiercely. You and Dr. Porter and my dad and everyone else, you gave me a family when I had none. You gave me a future when I couldn't see past the next meal. You gave me my mom's dream for me. That's everything. They stood there in the quiet park as the last of the partygoers drifted away. A boy who'd lost everything and a man who'd had to lose everything to find what mattered, both of them changed irrevocably by one desperate night when courage met crisis and created something neither could have imagined. In the distance, the Angela Brooks Memorial Clinic's lights still glowed, serving the evening's last patients. The affordable housing units surrounding it stood solid and safe, keeping families together. The community center hummed with activity. The foundation's offices were already planning next month's initiatives. All of it interconnected, all of it sustainable, all of it proof that one woman's life and death could mean something beyond tragedy if enough people cared enough to build something lasting. Graham looked at Jalen, this extraordinary boy who'd saved his leg and his life and his soul, and felt gratitude so profound it was almost painful. Thank you, Graham said quietly, for taking the risk of helping someone who didn't deserve it, for showing me what actually matters, for letting me be part of your life and your mother's legacy. Thank you for listening, Jalen replied, for changing, for building something that would make my mom proud. They walked home together through streets that were theirs now, part of a community that had welcomed them both. The homeless genius and the reformed billionaire, both of them proof that people could change, that second chances mattered, that one act of desperate courage could ripple outward and transform everything it touched. And somewhere, Graham liked to think, Angela Brooks was watching her son walk safely through the night, fed and housed and loved and supported, becoming everything she'd known he could be. Her death had been a tragedy that should never have happened. But her legacy, built on her son's courage and a community's commitment to making sure no one else fell through the cracks, was changing the world one person, one family, one neighborhood at a time. It wasn't redemption. Graham knew he could never fully make up for decades of harm. But it was something. It was real. It was lasting. And it was built on the simple truth that Jalen had shown him that night in Sterling Oaks, that every person matters, that worth has nothing to do with wealth, and that the greatest power isn't in accumulating resources, but in using them to lift others up. As he unlocked his apartment door and said goodnight to Jalen, who headed upstairs to Dr. Porter's place, Graham felt peace settle over him. Not the peace of absolution. He didn't deserve that yet, might never deserve it, but the peace of purpose, of connection, of finally understanding what it meant to build a life that mattered. Tomorrow he'd wake up and do it all again. Work with the foundation. Visit the clinic. Attend community meetings. Help wherever he was needed. Build systems that would outlast him. Support Jalen and Dennis and everyone else trying to overcome circumstances that should never have existed in the first place. Tomorrow and every day after, for however many days he had left. Using what he had to serve instead of accumulate. Listening instead of dictating. Being part of instead of standing apart from. All because one barefoot 9-year-old boy had walked into his life and shown him that healing wasn't just about fixing bodies. It was about repairing souls, rebuilding communities, and recognizing the worth in every human life. Graham turned off the lights in his small apartment and lay down in his modest bed, exhausted and content. Outside his window, the neighborhood he now called home settled into sleep. Families safe in affordable housing, a clinic ready to serve tomorrow's patients, a community stronger because people had chosen connection over isolation, compassion over profit, and lasting change over temporary charity. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.